Welcome. Glad you made it to the 2024 Hacking for Humanity. Give yourselves a round of applause for actually getting here today. It's no small feat. We had 81 people register, and only 15 brave teams and individuals submitted things at the end of the week. So you know how fortunate you were to actually push through and actually get things done. So that's actually the attrition rate that we expected from last year as well. It was about the same. So great job and congrats to all of you. So let me just tell you how this morning is going to go. So as we said before, you'll have 3 minutes to do your presentation. The timer will start when you start talking. So don't be stressed about like, I have to run up to the front. We'll come up to the front. If you look back in the corner, there's a 3-minute timer. When you start talking, she will press the button. At the end is a nice beep. So it's not super loud, but it's loud enough to let everyone know your time is allotted. Once that time is done, our nice 4 judges in the back here will have about 4 to 5 minutes to ask you some questions. So let's take a minute, turn to the judges, and I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves so you know what's happening here. So let's start all the way on the right here with our 2 policy judges.
Thank you. There is a microphone. Hi, I'm Annie Newman. I'm Governor Shapiro's Director of Digital Strategy in Harrisburg, and super excited to be here with you guys.
Chad Heitzenreiter. I'm with the RAND Corporation. I'm the Senior Information Scientist, primarily working on national defense cyber policy.
Ashik Kudabaksh. I'm an assistant professor from Rochester Institute of Technology, and I work at the intersection of artificial intelligence, political science, and natural language processing.
Well, fantastic. So we'll have a chance to hear a little bit later from the judges to hear about what they're doing and how this is important. But for now, I want to hear from all of you. Any questions before we jump right into it? Wonderful. I'm sure there'll be no issues with getting everybody up and down and all the presentations going on. All right, so 1 more minute. Oh yeah, we do have a question.
So real quick, yeah, bring your own computer up. We'll work that. Also, before each of your presentations, I'll work with you to get everything set up and how you need it. I have adapters up there ready to go for you if you need, to plug in your laptop and whatnot. But right now, if your PowerPoints, I have all the PowerPoints that John was presented with loaded and ready to go on that machine, but you cannot do presenter view on my machine. It's a 1-for-1 picture. So you can also bring your laptop up and just follow along as well.
Just bring any notes you have up here to read along.
If you can hold that presentation remote up, John. So that's a presentation remote. There's a big green button, go forward. Little red button, goes backwards. And then there is a laser pointer on that as well. Okay, so after you're done presenting, please don't walk away with that. We need that. So just make sure you leave it up there when you're done presenting, okay?
All right. So confronting online hate. Oh, countering online hate. We have 2 different words here. That's really exciting. All right. Either way, we're obviously focused on online hate here. This is co-sponsored, as you can see, from 5 different organizations. And all of us sort of work together to help to tackle this big issue. And one reason why we do that is because of how important and how central this issue is to a healthy, thriving online space. And for us at Duquesne University with the Greffenstadt Center, Duquesne is a Catholic institution. And so for us, speaking from that sort of Catholic perspective, it means a lot because in the Catholic Church, human dignity is a core part of what it means to be a Catholic and to be a Christian. And so for us, it's a very natural part to talk about combating or countering or confronting online hate is a core part of what it means to uphold human dignity online as well as in our in-person relationships, because so much of things online can easily bleed into in-person. All right, I have taken up plenty of time with my first 4 minutes, so I'm going to get started. Very last thing to say is, as I've told you in the past, the judges might ask you things that were not in your presentation but were in your submitted materials, so don't be thrown off by that. If you have follow-up stuff or the judges have follow-up questions from you, we can always pull you aside later. So because I will chop the judges' questions off at 5 minutes as well. So if things get a little heated and you want to talk about it more later, we're going to leave it and then bring that up later. All right. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Liam Hill up to the front for submission number 1. So I'll give him a round of applause.
My name is Liam Hill, and I'm a student here at Duquesne University, and I chose to do the policy track for this event, and my focus was on redefining hate. Now, just a little background into it. This was a call to the Education Department for reform. I wanted to focus on revamping the education experience and including classes on things such as generative AI, debate tactics, calming techniques, really just focus on how to debate effectively and communicate effectively with others without losing, your cool, becoming too emotional, and really undermining your argument by doing so. So it focuses on mental health, how to use AI, and how to focus on how to use AI. The end goal of this is to limit censoring posts and actually just force engagement between hate speech users and people who would fight against it. The theory behind this is that censorship and bans on a basic level don't do anything to address hate directly. All it does is really hide it from public view. Doing this ends up with these things called epistemic bubbles, and also hate bubbles, where it creates these echo chambers where people who are like-minded tend to talk to people of the same thought process. This is very discouraging to progress, very discouraging to talking between different subjects. It ends up getting in the way of progress. So this policy calls on the education department to teach students how to safely and effectively speak with people who are using hate speech and to engage with people who are using hate speech. It would actually allow for more hate speech on social platforms with the intent that the public would engage with it and try to diffuse it themselves instead of just having a program run and just cut it out. You could also have a program edit and search for these and give potential articles that also talk about the opposite side of the argument. Really just allowing discourse is what this really focuses on. So again, these are the supposed classes: statistical analysis, open forums. The education department and the government really in general would have to coordinate with tech companies in order to allow these forums to go, because obviously tech companies are the ones who decide what information gets to be allowed on their platforms. And these are just various class suggestions that would be used so that students would know how to debate against hate speech. Some pros and cons. This is a focus on the future generations so that they can be better, they can do better, and really create a discussion instead of just limiting what we're talking about. Obvious cons: lower income communities would be incapable of access to higher education resources. So this comes with the end goal to teach the next generation how to address hate speech. 3 minutes.
Excellent. Questions from the judges?
Let's see if our mic does work. So my main question is, as I'm sure you know, in the U.S., education is a largely federal system. Your memo was to the Federal Department of Education. How would you think about the incentives to ensure actual uptake at the state and county level?
Yes, so specifically the call was a template. So just creating a set of classes, a set of recommendations to be used at the local level. And typical incentives include funding, programs, co-ops, access to scholarships, less positive ways of doing it, but common enough in government is tax leveraging and such other incentives in order to get local institutions to implement these, because they do have to be implemented on the local level in order for them to work.
I think you recognize several examples in your memo that are very well placed in, the Nazi Party, the Khmer Rouge, et cetera. But at a time when a lot of local school boards are in more conservative areas, pushing back on some of these really critical, things to teach because they're, for a lot of different reasons. How do you make sure from the federal level, who you address this to, that local level, or I guess, let me take that back. Are there any safeguards in place from the federal level that can ensure that local school boards that may have a certain view on things like book banning or teaching, World War II accurately, et cetera, are able to use your examples accurately to stem misinformation and online hate?
So to understand your question, you're saying that like more typically conservative districts would have a bit more of a focus on banning such topics in general. So there would be a large focus on the way that this is framed. Very large focus that this is strictly, we are giving exactly what happened in history. This is by definition what happened. We're not going to go into details and like analysis of that for just starting. Just give them an idea of this is what happened and this is what is going to happen. This thing exists. All right, and as for the classes, the classes addressed hate speech more in a indirect way, so I felt like that was a effective way to do it because they taught students how to analyze and properly perform a statistical analysis. I mean, you can't argue against math. Another one was the use of generative AI and understanding generative AI. That's going to be a tool that employers are going to expect future students to know how to use, just as they expect you to know how to use Google at this point. And also debate and mental health classes. The mental health classes may be poorly received, but I wouldn't expect the other ones to be have any issue enforcing those more on a local level.
Thank you.
So, question that comes to my mind. This proposal seems to assume that everyone in the ecosystem is kind of a good actor, so to speak, right? That everybody is engaged in trying to reduce. Like, how would you deal with kind of the weaponization of hate speech and folks that might misuse the ability to, through bots and other mechanisms, kind of propagate hate speech because these brains have been loosened?
Yes, so as for the discussion of bots, that would also be included in the talks about AI in general, machine learning, generative AI, just knowing how to identify a bot, knowing how to understand a bot. And this was more of a general suggestion. It would have to be paired with still, like the tech companies would still have to do a level of censorship. This was to decrease the level of censorship. So it would still need to protect against more violent and aggressive forms of hate speech.
All right, let's give a round of applause. Thank you so much. The Team Fantastic Fellows, come on up to the front. After the 3-minute presentation. Hold on 1 second. Judges, y'all ready? All right, whenever you're ready.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jacob.
I'm Emily, and this is our product, Bias Blocker. So Bias Blocker is a novel filter designed by a multidisciplinary team that identifies and eliminates hateful or inappropriate speech to ensure the safe and productive utilization of AI tools. Bias Blocker aims to increase the use of AI in K-12 schools by limiting the hateful and biased content that young learners are exposed to when seeking information via chatbots or other generative AI tools. So according to Inside Higher Education publication, there is a rapid adoption of AI tools among students. Research showed a significant increase from 27% of students using AI tools in the fall to 49% by the spring. Our group's fall research surrounding AI in the educational landscape has uncovered the incredible potential artificial intelligence has to enhance learning experiences among diverse student demographics. However, while AI offers promising avenues for students grappling with challenging topics, seeking answers beyond traditional classroom resources, or accessing reliable information, concerns persist regarding the prevalence of harmful or inappropriate content within AI-driven platforms. Our solution is to develop a machine learning model that ensures the safe and productive utilization of AI tools by implementing robust filters capable of identifying and eliminating hateful or inappropriate speech.
Our state-of-the-art large language model and hate speech filter is highly specialized to avoid unwanted searching. In our custom-built web application demo, you can see we ask it for cooking recipes, but it denies the request. However, it can intelligently understand commands And if you prompt it for news articles, it will return a list of the top 10 current news articles. As you can see at the bottom, there is an article that contained hate speech. Our filter detected this article and censored the speech. Of course, this is just a demonstration. In our final product, it would exclude the article altogether.
So our technology is designed for K through 12 school districts to implement in their classrooms. We will engage with school principals to gather feedback on filter parameters, implementation barriers, and reported classroom benefits or drawbacks. We will also perform research on internet use in schools to optimally target hate speech and bias that is most experienced by young learners. This information will help us make necessary improvements for future models. We want young students to have positive experiences with AI and learn strategies for effective AI use early on in their education. Bias Blocker will help to achieve this goal by enabling students in K through 12 to have access to safe, non-hateful, and unbiased AI in the classroom. Thank you.
All right, 22 seconds to spare. Well done.
In the context of, say, debiasing word embeddings, there are literature which shows that it's very hard to achieve that. You can maybe fix some of the superficial things, but the deeper biases still remain. So how would you address more deeper kind of biases which are not immediately obvious, but are still present in the system?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are going to approach that in two ways. The first is to make sure our chatbots are trained on responsibly sourced corpuses. So as you said, a lot of the problem is the underlying bias. So making sure our training data is clean. If you look at a model like ChatGPT that scans the entire internet, of course you're going to encounter hateful speech in that context. We're going to make sure that we responsibly source our training data for our chatbots so that that underlying bias is not even an issue by the time it comes into production.
Got a question. Who do you envision as drawing the parameters for what qualifies as the hate speech? Is it the school districts? Is it the designer, like you, the designer of the tool? And then depending on what your answer is, how do you account for the possibility that like what is hate speech to somebody of one political persuasion is not for the other? Like what we're hearing in COSA right now in the news in terms of like how would LGBTQ or trans content be treated, for example?
Yeah, so when we were designing this, we really were looking into it being able to be tailored to a specific school district or to a specific principal, and kind of what we have a ton of different ranges of what people view and how different school districts operate. So just like different school districts have different policies surrounding internet use and certain things that they block their students from seeing on the internet, it would kind of be the same, and we would work together with a superintendent or a principal to kind of tailor it to their specific parameters that they're looking for that district.
Is there an ability to scale the program from, K to 12 so that, K are not seeing certain things, whereas as students get older, they're maybe learning what exists and also how to deal with it?
Absolutely. Actually, in our model, there's an inbuilt parameter to adjust the sensitivity of what it filters out. So as children grow up and you want them to be exposed to more information, maybe some things that aren't as pleasant, history related, you can absolutely adjust the sensitivity so that it can be custom built to the learning experience, so we can make sure that kids develop alongside AI in the most effective way.
Given the target demographic, particularly the older end of it, have you considered, what sorts of prompt engineering might occur, and how you deal with perhaps, using slang or other sorts of things that might not be immediately recognized?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our demo, we showed that each chatbot is highly specialized. So we actually use a semantic model that will detect the nature of the request and then reject the request if it's not related to the chatbot's intended use. So in our example, it was cooking recipes, which is a harmless example. If, for say, a student tried to access the chatbot and use it in a harmful way, or tried to use prompts to get it to say something that was not pleasant, it actually has a filter in there semantically to be able to detect what is a valid request or not, and then be able to reject or approve that request.
So if you combine kind of some invalid requests with valid requests, so news articles about, or something like that, would it capture something like that, or?
Yeah, it's part of the dual capability. It filters both the request and the data it's retrieving. So even if you tried to trick the prompt to get it to return news articles that contained hate speech, as we mentioned earlier, it's actually trained on a responsibly sourced corpus. And if it detects hate speech in the news articles it's returning, it's going to censor that as well. So it's kind of a dual functionality in both censoring the prompt, making sure it's safe, but also in the data it retrieves.
All right, right on time. Thank you so much. All right, HateBot is next. It's a very aggressively named group. It's all good. It's all good. Next year we should have an award for best group name. It's a lot of good contenders this year. And just so no one's thrown off, at some point, a news cameraman will be coming in here to film some of this for one of the local channels. So just so you're not thrown off, that happens during your time up at the front. That's what's going on. All right, fantastic.
Holden.
I'm Yvonne.
And I'm Rory McCann, and we are HateBot. So we designed a little Discord bot to detect implicit bias. We realized that Discord is one of the top messaging platforms with 19 million servers and 175 million monthly users worldwide. It is typically used in gaming communities with integration on consoles as well as PCs. Although there is moderation available, much of the hate falls through the cracks. Approximately 1 in 10 young players are exposed to some sort of white supremacy, which is far too high. Our bot aims to combat this by monitoring a Discord server, creating a log of flagged messages in MongoDB. From here, we can use the data to find language habits and properly address them by sending educational prompts individually to users.
Online hate plagues communities that are meant to bring people together. The current approach in many of these kind of forums is when they pick up on hate, they just straight out ban the users. But the main source of hate is ignorance. And if you just ban someone, they're never going to learn from their mistakes. Our aim is to educate people. There's kind of two groups we see using hate, people who are willfully using it and people who are just ignorant of what they're saying. We're aiming towards that second group to try to change their language habits and to educate them instead of just kicking them off the platform to encourage real change.
So this is our demo. Basically what's going on here is our bot's getting initialized on a personal machine. The bot's listening in on a conversation. When a flag word is sent, the bot picks up on that and makes an API call to a large language model that we implemented and returns with a hate score 0 to 1. If the hate score is above a certain threshold, it's going to return a message to the user to educate.
Actually, you get this one. Sorry.
Our bot is aimed towards Discord servers. As CS students, almost all of our classes have a Discord server where our TAs and our professors reach out to us. On these large servers, though, the ratio of people moderating is often 1 to 100, if not even more, and that's just too many people for these moderators to have to look through. So we're trying to help these moderators get all the people that they can't catch normally.
We encountered a lot of ethical considerations. We don't have too much time. But our bot uses an AI model to detect this implicit bias in the first place, which we realize is not the best. We would like to refine how we get our implicit data. And we also had a last-minute breakage. We had a different system for checking the implicit bias that was a little better at testing the actual implicitness. Like we could say something like, you people are the worst drivers, and would actually detect that as implicit bias and hate. But that functionality fell apart on Thursday morning. We tried our old code, but it just didn't work. Oh, no. Okay, well, I'll leave this up.
We can leave that up for the questions. Good job. Well done.
So, how are you planning to deal with the false positives?
What do you mean by the false positives?
Like, the bot actually flags a message which is just perfectly fine.
Oh, yeah.
So
Combination of both.
basically, we have a sort of two-step process to this. We have a flag list. So in order for a positive to even come out, it has to be a word that we've decided has been flagged. So that's sort of like the first step. And then the second step is we're feeding it through an AI model to come back with a score. And then we're checking to see if the score is below a certain threshold, we're just going to ignore it. And if it's above a certain threshold, we'll treat it as something positive.
Also, following on that, who gets to set these thresholds? Would that be something that like Discord would do, that the moderators would do? And I guess in particular, I'm curious about if this comes back and says, hey, we think you ought to do better here. How much better do they have to do? Like, could they sit there and just basically keep trying until they get just the right level of speech to get through, but still perhaps conveys their message?
Yeah, so currently we have a few parameters that we could adjust. It's not set up for moderators to be able to access these parameters currently, but end goal, it would be for the moderators to personalize their server, because an educational, like a classroom server, is much different than just 4 people playing some video games together, and we would want to adjust accordingly.
And we can also adjust the words that we flag to kind of fit the scenario that we want to work in.
Other questions from judges? Could you tell us about your next steps?
Yeah, sure. So currently our bot is not ready to work on the large scale. We had a late realization that we cannot use the large language model for our educational blurbs, so we had to take some time to write them by hand. Our first priority moving forward would be to increase the range of what our bot can do and detect on. We want to increase that. We also want to increase some anonymity in our data. Currently, the Discord usernames are in there, and we would like to somehow hash that to remain anonymous data. Oh, and the number one thing is really the implicitness back. So we had 2 different, we used Hugging Chat's API, and we used 2 different language models one was to get a classification. This is toxic, this is obscene, this is something like that. And then we also had one that was a 1 to 5 scale to detect the implicit, like, nature of the message. And so that,
Which language models are there?
we used Hugging Chat.
Hugging
Yeah,
Face.
okay.
Hugging Face, oh, sorry. Hugging Chat's the API call.
We use the BERT model from Hugging Face, more specifically.
Yeah, so that's what we use for our classification. Our 1 to 5 implicit bias fell apart on Thursday morning. We tried our old code, but we couldn't get it to work. But that was really the core of our thing. But that's the number 1 step right now, is to get that backing up.
Could you talk a little bit more about your additional security measures?
Yeah, so right now we have 2 tables in our database. One that has each event that we flag with the whole flagged like sentence or message, and then specifically the words that we flagged. And then we also have a table that has the user and the Discord ID. Our goal would be to hash the Discord ID when we send it to the table. So if you look at the table, it doesn't just have someone's Discord ID. So you can't be like, oh, John said this or whatever, but this whatever number said this. So more looking for patterns and keeping privacy.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Miles Kramer. Miles Kramer. Come on up to the front. if you do need to hop out and use the restroom or grab a snack, please do it during judges' questions, not the presentation. Good to go.
All right, so my name's Miles. I'm a MPA student at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm gonna jump right in with the state of online harassment in gaming. So, 3 out of 4 young people have experienced some sort of online harassment while gaming. And a more serious form of that harassment is sexual and gender-based harassment. Here's some alarming statistics, including gamers as young as 10 have reported receiving graphic rape and death threats while gaming online. The thesis behind this project is that by expanding indecency and profanity standards, the FCC could address aspects of sexual harassment online and improve youth safety. So, right now let's talk about the current broadcast standards enforced by the FCC. There's obscenity, which is essentially reserved for pornography. It's a really high bar, and this is not permitted to be broadcast at any point in time. Then there's indecency, which is slightly a lower bar, still sexual in nature, as well as profanity, which right now current enforcement is really reserved for a few key words used for like sexual and excretory functions, essentially. Right now, the FCC issues fines against offending broadcasting platforms, broadcast being limited right now to public radio and TV, and there's also some safe harbor protections built in. So what this means is indecent and profane content can't be broadcast between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. while children are likely to be present. But it still is sort of like whenever you try to do content regulation, you butt up against the First Amendment. It's legal because any sort of indecent or profane speech it can still be had between like 10 and 6 when children aren't present. So I detail this in a memo, but essentially I'm proposing that the FCC expands broadcast standards to online gaming services, including this time-based safe harbor, not adding it to any sort of age-restricted platforms where there aren't children and youth present, as well as some additional safe harbors. So if somebody's proactively taking down content, they won't be penalized by this. A corollary to this policy, since the FCC issues fines against broadcast platforms, we'll have to amend Section 230 to allow there to be some sort of civil penalty against online platforms. Right now, Section 230 largely prevents that. So the main outcome that we want to see is we want to empower online victims of sexual harassment. So, for example, if this sexual harassment includes patently offensive portrayals of sexual activity, this now allows victims to report it to the FCC, have an external enforcement accountability, rather than relying strictly on the internal controls of online gaming companies. Some other considerations that we made while shaping this policy are surveillance concerns. So this is why we picked the FCC to enforce this. They respond to complaints, not through proactive monitoring of broadcasts. That has important considerations for the First Amendment. You can't sort of proactively regulate speech. You can only go after sort of speech that has already occurred. We also thought about the impact on some marginalized communities, including like LGBT concerns with indecency rhetoric, right? We've seen a lot of this be used to censor public drag performances or censor books in libraries. Again, why we picked the FCC is they have narrow legislative mandates and they're subject to congressional oversight that the judiciary does not have. So in theory, this can help sort of prevent like a single rogue activist judge from targeting LGBT platforms. So that's sort of why this is built the way that it is. I have some points on industry buy-in. I see I'm out of time. And with that, I will take any questions.
All right, good job, good job. It's hard, it's not an easy thing. All right, questions?
I think this is very smart and really creative. I also think, thinking about what we see in Harrisburg sometimes, there's some parallels here in that this policy defines an e-gaming platform almost in the same way as gambling versus skills games. If you're familiar with that, skills games are sort of a narrowly unregulated field because they're a little bit different than gambling or other sin taxable things. Is there an unintended consequence here of kind of a corollary popping up? So say, instead of an e-gaming platform, it's a, my shopping game isn't a game, it's something else.
Yeah, so I think I try to stay away from esports, right? Because there's so much like money tied up in that. And really I was thinking about like online platforms where there are children sort of congregating. So there's a lot more space to write bills than there are memos. So that is something that I think would be important to define is like building it broad enough that it's really, again, targeting children, but without going after platforms where there is like valid, albeit, indecent or profane speech. Yeah.
Two questions. They're unrelated. I'm going to give them to you both, and then you can address them. So the first, I just wanted to clarify. I know you said that the FCC would not be doing proactive monitoring, but are you envisioning that the platforms themselves would be? And then my second question is, in your memo, the last paragraph or two is talking about existing policies from gaming companies, and it sounds, the ones you reference at least seem to be really taking these already on board as best practices. So I'm just wondering how the proposed regulation can coexist with the current state of things in the industry. Would this be raising the bar or basically writing into regulation what's already being done?
Yeah, so I'll address the second question first. The really narrow focus here is indecency and profanity. There are a lot of online platforms that have standards that sort of prevent that. So to answer your question, for the compliant platforms, there is no sort of extra bar. That's part of the reason this is designed. In my mind, again, if we're writing this as like a bill, for example, there might be like a certain threshold where if you have so many users, then it sort of kicks on, but this is meant to sort of capture the people who aren't like the Roblox of the world being really proactive there. Sorry, what was the first question?
It was just me trying to understand. So the FCC is not going to be proactive monitoring.
Yes.
They're not going to be screening in a Big Brother kind of way. But would the users expect that the platform themselves is monitoring content and chats back and forth?
Yeah, so the way that I think about this is it's kind of analogous to like a talk show TV station where there's people still sitting who are like, oh, you can't say these words. And they'll bleep them out. There's a little bit of a delay. Like there's ways that sort of broadcast platforms currently do that. That's a way that I'm thinking about the responsibility of these like gaming platforms, right? Like the FCC won't be proactively monitoring. And I think we saw very similar things with the DMCA, where when you say we're going to penalize you if you don't take down content that somebody asks you to take down because it infringes on their copyright, you start to see YouTube getting really, really good at proactively identifying that because they don't want to respond to 1,000 different complaints. They don't want to have that liability. So it's kind of, there are sort of both parts of that, right? If Roblox right now can currently prevent indecency and profanity, I don't play Roblox, but like if they can, great. If not, I would expect to see like a lot more, like even a market for sort of those proactive like identification and response platforms.
Thank you.
So it always seems that whenever you start talking about decency, profanity, and other things, you run into all sorts of free speech issues. So what's the free speech balance here?
Yeah, so I guess the real quick sort of protections that exist is the Supreme Court it was FCC versus Pacifica Corporation. As long as you have safe harbor regulations, you're good, like boundaries, you're good on sort of censoring indecency because they've balanced the right to access it with the protection of youth. Again, we're not talking about hate speech as this big broad thing. It is just specifically these things where there's existing precedent for you can't say it on public broadcast radio or public TV. I say I'm out of time. I'm happy to chat more about this, but yeah.
Thanks so much. Give him a round of applause. All right, the Bub Hub. The Bub Hub is next. Speaking of creative team names. All right. Whenever you're ready.
Real hate that people experience when online comes offline. We need to help people stay in schools, stay in the community, and be proud of the country or group they represent, quoted by Annie Newman. These are some statistics that we found, but the most important one is that 4 out of 5 students, which is 81%, say that they would more likely intervene or talk about cyberbullying if they could do it anonymously. Now I'm going to introduce you to Xavier Chambers, who's going to talk more about our mission statement.
And with that, I would like to welcome you to Cloudly. Our mission statement is to offer a safe place to offload your personal experiences while keeping your identity anonymous, as well as get or give advice to those who may be experiencing the same hardships that you have.
Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our community inclusion plan. We need to get our users to our users, sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Our users tell their story by entering a cloud in the box at the top, and then they get or give, they have the option to get or give advice to the box below that. And they can also tell how their day has been by the how are you doing today section with the hearts below that.
Now, once a cloud is submitted, then it is officially risen to the sky. And with this cloud-to-sky relationship, we'll be having all of their information stored on a CMS, which is a content management system that allows us to go in and mitigate any potential trolls that might happen throughout our cloud system. Here is a live demo of one of the clouds that were entered by one of our concurrent users in January 27th. We were able to have people come in and give one of their stories as well as the advice that they could want to receive or have been able to deal with through their experience with hate that happens in the community. The overall gist is to understand that you are never alone. You are able to contribute to Cloudly and bring the community together through your hard times and experiences. You have the ability to offer advice to others so everyone has the ability to grow together.
Our goal is to provide another place for users to feel free to share their experiences with hate and not be judged by others around them, but also feel connected to somebody. And remember, you are never alone.
Fantastic.
What kind of measures are you planning to take to make sure if someone posts a story, the story is properly anonymized?
So, you want me to
You
take
can
that
take
one?
that one.
So we'll be able to implement, right now our content management system does not contain any type of filtering. But what we can do is go in manually and manage every single ticket. And our website has the ability, obviously, to enter a script that allow us to tell off of a blacklist on what can and cannot be said and reject the user from being able to put in certain things that may be, say, taking advantage of the system we've created.
No, I'm saying that if someone accidentally de-anonymizes themselves, like puts like some information with
Okay, you
which
got it.
they can be tracked.
So the goal is to be able to use, say, example of an AI model that can represent names. Guys, names, the anonymity of purpose is to prevent anybody from entering a name. Therefore, we should be able to implement, right now we do not have the implementation, but we'd be able to implement something that detects if a name is there and also blacklist the ability to post that ticket.
What would be the value proposition for kind of a user to use something like this instead of, say, anonymizing a Twitter account and just posting, their experiences there?
I got this one. So this is to build a community and see that other stories of other people who are going through hate and to build a community. So you saw the quote, "You are never alone," and I guess it's trying to grow you tolerant to see other people are going through things, and you saw the advice tab, you can see other people are getting advice, and they can also ask Cloudly what they want to see from us.
And I just want to clarify, so I submit a original query or content. Is all the responses, are they all generated by real people, or do you also have an AI-generated function?
You got it.
So it's all based on the community itself. The community makes what it becomes. So therefore, every prompt, such as the example you saw, was entered by a real person due to their experience. So there would not be any generated tickets automatically. That could be something we could put in, but preferably it's the idea that real stories. So someone can go in and see a catalog of stories and events and say that I am not alone in battling with what I'm battling with, and also learn that other people are dealing with other things that you can learn from as well.
Thank you.
What sorts of security measures do you envision needing on the back end? Obviously, you're getting a lot of very personal details, even if they're anonymized. How do you plan to handle that?
So the goal is to be able to, I'll take this
Okay.
one. So the goal is to be able to implement an innovative idea of AI that goes through and makes sure that, such as enabling the ability to say a state, for example, or a city, country. Make sure that those things are not necessarily implemented into this. Because right now, there is obviously the ability to implement changes in in the language in it, be able to translate. So it doesn't matter where it's coming from, but it's a matter of the name recognition. So I would say using some sort of AI generative blacklist to be able to sort out and again deny the tickets that come in like that.
So I guess I'm thinking even beyond that in terms of, would you be storing IP addresses and other sorts of things along with the data that's uploaded, and what sorts of targets would that perhaps give people who wanted to I don't know, they read a clause and they think, oh, that might be about me, and I want to go in and find out, who's doing that.
So the whole anonymous feature is that no, that we do not intend on planning to store anything besides the story itself. See, it gets filtered through the content management system. Therefore, it's taken out of your hands and straight onto the system. Now, you can put a request into our email to be able to remove it or ask more details about it, but the goal is not to have the ability to know who posted what ticket. At the end of the day, it is supposed to be generalized.
Great job. All right, Niav Oza. Apologies if I mispronounced that.
My name's Neve Oza, and today I want to talk to you all about DigiLicense. DigiLicense, as the name suggests, it's a digital license of sorts. I wanted it to repave the experience users have with the internet and make internet browsers more accessible with a more user-friendly interface, modified search results, a virtual assistant like a passenger seat driver, I guess, and also encouraging reading and media literacy in minors, which also helps to address the ever-growing amount of users of the internet. So how it works, I wanted DigiLicense to be added as an app or browser extension, forcing users to sign in. For those above 18, it would use age verification technology and software. And concerns may rise about data being collected of minors, but that data is already being collected, and it would just be used in a more efficient way now. So for the junior licenses, I have 3 sort of levels, I guess, for it. Or not 3 levels of the junior license, just of the license for 3 different age groups. For those under 13, I wanted to implement a reading, media literacy, and an internet safety test to go through the different age groups and progress. I also wanted to implement a 3-strike policy for those who break internet safety ethic rules, locking their DigiLicense for X amount of time. And in the case for the beginner license, slightly less. This is my prototype. It shows an 8-year-old user submitting the passing of their reading, media literacy, and online safety assessment, giving them a star for each, and allowing them to pass on to the next group. So addressing internet safety with DigiLicense allows us to tackle the issues of falling literacy rates, online accountability, as well as increasing media literacy, all while making the internet a safer and more accessible place.
That was fantastic. Questions?
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the age verification process. Like, would they be required to, what exactly would they be required to provide, and how would that then get stored?
So there's a lot of software that already exists with age verification using people's IDs. It just takes their ID, verifies that they're a real person, real age and everything, and then it's gone from their system. I just wanted I wanted the search results and the internet experience to be appropriate for each age group, which is why it's there.
Can you share a little bit more about how you see this being used? So is this something that you'd see being mandatory for internet users that a government or a utilities company would have to enact? Or is there a value proposition for families and individuals to opt in to the DigiLicense?
I wanted this to first start out for families because there's a lot of parents who are just giving their children unmonitored and internet access, and it's kind of hard to monitor what your child is doing. So I wanted DigiLicense to be able to help the parents. I also think it could be used in schools as well as expanding to outside. It's just more difficult to do for the higher age groups, it would be a lot easier to be used for families, I think.
Can you talk a little bit more about like how it would work? So if you have a certain DigiLicense for an 8-year-old per se, in practice, what does that 8-year-old see or not see online?
So the entire internet browsing experience would be different. It would be one screen basically. I didn't design it all, but it would be like the search result, like the search box with your virtual assistant, and then like the task that they need to do to progress to the next level, as well as educational and games. So it would just be like a more restrictive internet experience, I think.
I have one question. Is it possible for an 8-year-old to view an internet which is actually more of like a 6-year-old will view, depending on how they perform on the tests?
Yes, that is possible, and I wanted it to be like that on purpose. So I wanted the child who is in that age group to be performing as well as their peers, with whether that's reading, media literacy, or internet safety. And there's also educational links that would be provided for them.
Any other questions?
Just one, and if I couldn't quite tell if this was really only 13 or below, or if that's just your example. But so for social media in particular, per the concerns about addictive properties, would you integrate anything in terms of time limits to counter those addictive properties?
Yeah,
in
I
theory,
wanted
you could
to-
still have age-appropriate content that is still negative in that way.
Yeah, I did under 13 because of social media being allowing users at the age of 13. And I did want to implement a time limit on that. That can also vary with age and also the family's preferences.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Dr. Slattery had to step out for a minute. Thank you for your presentation. So it's my pleasure to welcome Polyhacks next to the stage.
Good afternoon, judges. We're Team Polyhacks, and we're here to present our policy related to inclusive AI image generation. As you can see, text-to-image AI generation not only spreads, but amplifies racial and gendered stereotypes. White males represented the majority of prompts relating to high-paying jobs, while women of color are commonly depicted to have low-paying jobs. When Midjourney, a prominent AI image generation system, was prompted to generate Black African doctors providing care for white suffering children, some generations were simply unable to do so. AI image generation discriminates against marginalized communities, and more needs to be done to address this hate.
We plan on addressing this issue with 2 prongs. The first will be consisting of long-term recommendations. So we suggest that inclusive AI image generation to be situated in a broader and more bipartisan conversations and concerns about cybersecurity, deepfakes, and more. And in this way, we suggest reference to the recently proposed federal legislation on AI risk management, as well as California's recently proposed legislation on AI risk management prior to making AI public. Finally, we also suggest there to be a federal affirmation of the validity of fair use to facilitate the inclusion of copyright materials in AI datasets.
Reducing algorithmic bias starts with the people creating these technologies, and so the first step in doing so is encouraging tech companies to incorporate DEI principles into currently white male-dominated processes and research spaces and elevate intersectional voices. So we will equip the resources and expertise of nonprofit organizations such as Code 2040 and the Algorithmic Justice League, which seek to amplify marginalized voices in science and tech spaces. These efforts will be sustained through a diverse intersectional task force of tech and social justice experts.
Strict and mandatory testing of these programs will help prevent damaging effects of AI. In addition, utilizing copyrighted datasets will increase the credibility of generations. AI is only a tool, and the biases that are shown in these generations are not as a result of the machines, but the way they are programmed and the material that is fed to them. Because of that, increased diversity in the AI industry will remediate discriminatory generations. This framework urges human centricity and helps create AI that serves and benefits all.
Sorry. Okay, so wrong slide, but combating AI image generation will affect everyone. So heavily commercialized and disseminated images spread the wrong idea, such as entrenched, antiquated ideas about gender and race to impressionable audiences. In addition, we will uplift marginalized communities within the CS industry, specifically supporting Black and Latinx technologists and people with intersectional identities.
Finally, we will mitigate hate and through education programs through federal grants, as well as copyright testing for feasibility.
All right, thank you so much.
On the question of fair use, that obviously opens a whole other can of worms in terms of who is harmed by that. But putting that aside for now, my sense is that it is largely suspected that many of the LLMs that you've called out in your presentation did use copyright material. That's why they're being sued repeatedly. So how would making it fair use and giving them permission to use the copyright material they've already used, how would that address the bias that's existing in their models?
All right, thank you so much for the question. So based on our research, we saw that there was some existing correlations between more reputable information being put into data sets just by nature of there being more resources in such data sets, as well as kind of the higher standards for something to get copyright. Of course, we obviously concede that copyright materials are definitely not immune to bias, and we definitely see the errors within this approach through possibilities. So that's why we went to implement a few sample test runs through specific AI programs to test if including more copyright sources will actually bear fruit, or if it will, as mentioned before, just lead to more lawsuits and more fraction. So we will test that, and then if it is ineffective, we will reallocate our resources and time and policy expertise with our collaboration with nonprofits and government agencies for better efforts.
Thank you. Yeah, congratulations. This was a great presentation. My question is also on fair use. I think a lot of your policy depends on the supplementary law affirming the validity of fair use. That is also really hotly contested. So say that that law doesn't happen and we don't have fair use. Does this policy still work? Is it still a viable path forward?
We believe that this policy overall is still very effective because of the multi-pronged nature of it. In addition, okay, the multi-pronged nature, sorry, I'm nervous. Okay, the multi-pronged nature of it with both short-term and long-term initiatives. So we still went to implement the reference of California and federal level legislation on risk management, as well as the short-term education initiatives.
You said on the slides that award instead of punish. What if different organizations try to use superficial improvements to receive the award? How would you deal with that?
So to address the exploitation of such federal grant money, we will have a rigorous application process where we will identify if the applying states or local governments will comply by the education standards, and we will also have frequent check-ins with the states and their schools to see the compliance, and we will still incentivize people and states to apply to these grants by attaching additional grant money to other very popular programs such as infrastructure to encourage states to apply and see DEI, inclusivity, and AI as a fruitful process.
What do you see as a timeline upon which you think results will occur? It seems like some of these things, particularly like the generation of additional content that then could be incorporated into models and actually see results, like could take a very long time.
So we did include in our memo that the process of like editing data sets is a very long-term process and would probably take a very, like maybe multiple years to go through with. But as AI is in such the early stages, we think that this is really the time that it's important to start taking these measures to diversify the data sets and the people working on them to stop preventing future issues.
And for short-term processes, there is already grants in like federal budgets right now.
All right, thank you so much. All right, the next group up is 8-Hate. Judges, we doing okay? Made it through hour number 1. Good job, everybody. There's ice cream at the end of this, so just hang in there. Just hang in there.
Hello guys, we are group 8-Hate and we are proud to announce to you our product Melon Talk. To just briefly go over of what we'll talk about in this presentation, first of all, we'll talk about the aim and the project. Secondly, we will talk about the project demo. Thirdly, we'll talk about how Melon Talk includes all communities. And finally, we'll talk about the opportunities that Melon Talk provides. Now, to first start off with the aim and the project, our aim with the Melon Talk is to mitigate hateful speech through pre-screening. Through the 1,400 data set that we have, we aim to mitigate hateful speech and alert others of potential hate through speech. And then this was our goal for this project, as we found out that 52% of the people experience online harassment through online communities.
Now I'll talk about the project prototype. On the left, you'll see a simple diagram that I drew before I actually started writing the code. The picture above is a chat screen, and you see it's split by 2. And the left one is seen by user 1, and the right one is for user 2. And beneath is the welcome screen. Now this is the final program. On the left, you see the welcome screen and our beloved logo. And on the right, you see the chat screen. It's left and right. And our theme color is pink because we promote love and we exclude hate.
So to briefly go over the chat screen a little bit more, so every time during the conversation, when someone projects any kind of words that contains profanity, our program will automatically filter those kind of speech and then make sure that the message is substituted with a message that says this message contains profanity. So to go over the inclusive parts of our program, so this was mainly created for gamers or any other online users to make sure that all of these users can be involved in a safe online communication environment. And then we aim to achieve the shared interest of making sure that all of these online users only experience positive experiences. And lastly, moving forward, we aim to target global users by making sure that we're not only limited to a single language, which is English at the moment, but then we're trying to make sure that our program can support other languages through its speech detection model as well. So the ultimate goal of Melon Talk was to interconnect the world through common interests without hate. And then we believe that the Melon Talk interconnects the world without hate by controlling what can be heard from the other side. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, great job. 7 seconds to spare. Good job. All right, questions?
Instead of like completely blocking the message, will it be an interesting idea to just distill the content of the message and remove the hateful content. Like say, I'm very upset about missing my flight or something, and I'm just like cursing, but I'm trying to reach out to my friend to help me out. Will it be useful to just rewrite the message so that my friend at least knows that I missed a flight and I'm upset, but without including the curse words?
For now, we have it as deleting the whole message, but if we were to think about points on improve to, that is definitely a valid point. But for now, we are trying to encourage the users to use more of a positive tone when trying to express their thoughts.
Could you talk a little bit more about how that's analyzed, and in particular, how that's contextualized, or the sentiment behind it, right? There are certainly different things that you could say that in different contexts might mean different things.
So right now, how it's analyzed is when the speech is detected, we're comparing each word inside the text with the given data set that we're currently using. But then moving forward, we want to make sure that we also do analyze certain phrases, not just only single vocabulary words, to make sure that we are filtering out text based on the entire speech and not just single vocabularies.
Who do you see being the user of this app, and do you think there's a risk from organizations like, say, universities that have certain, free speech codes or handbooks? Would they be able to use this app as well without being liable?
So our main focus is gamers because we primarily focus on speeches. So for gamers to communicate simultaneously. So our focus isn't currently for universities, but if we were to kind of delegate our melon talk to the universities, then we can definitely think about that.
Just wondering if you've given any thought as to like a escalation process if you have a false positive. So like one of the best examples I've heard is, this was years ago, Meta had a like process in place for their products. President Obama posted his favorite books list. It included Moby Dick, and it like censored Obama's post because of one word in there. So like any technical product, like you're gonna have errors, right? Ones like that where there was one word but context matters. So if I'm a user who's like, no, I just told somebody to read Moby Dick, do I have an escalation process, or is it just, I better find another way a new favorite book?
So I think one of the features that we want to add is right now the current feature that we have is filtering out, but then we also wanted to have a feature that puts words back in. So for example, for Moby Dick, we also need to consider the context that the word is used. So even if we do filter something out, within those groups where the words are filtered out, we're trying to make sure that we can put those back into saying that those words are okay to be used in certain contexts. So I think one of our next goals additionally will also be making sure we have that additional process of returning words back into the group where it's okay for them to be used.
Thank you.
How fuzzy can you make the matches? Is it going to be able to recognize if people use substitution or other ways to try to get around it?
So right now, I think the current vocabulary list, it contains a lot of words that are very similar to swear words as well. So for example, those like that have similar pronunciations. But then moving forward, we also should make sure that it can encompass a more diverse set of words as well.
Thank you so much. All right, looks like coquette.java is next. take this time in between that if you watch Channel 11 News at some point this evening, we should be on there. So that's who is just in here, and I got my chance to talk for 3 minutes, so you can see if whether or not I do a good job. So yeah, at some point he said it'll be on some point this evening, and it'll probably rerun later on tonight. So Channel 11, you can keep a watch for it. Should be fun.
So social media, excuse me, and the internet are amazing at connecting people who share similar beliefs to each other. And this can be a blessing, but also a curse, because unfortunately, hate is loudest in an echo chamber, and people are more likely to follow people and consume media and information that they already agree with. And many modern algorithms perpetuate this by being rewarded for returning information that the user probably already agrees with. So our platform that we came up with, called Think Circle, is a platform to help people connect with discourse outside of their immediate circle of thought. And we're committed to helping people formulate their own opinions by educating them on opposing topics. So one of the biggest factors to online hate often stems from ignorance, which is something that we're trying to combat with our platform. So our platform was created, the design of the platform was created using Figma, which is a great web design tool that can help with seamless development. And we also prototyped and created this static website using React.js, which is what you're looking at right now, with functional buttons and things of that sort. So we also wrote 2 supplementary algorithms to help help demonstrate the functionality and logic of our platform. So in our minds, ThinkCircle as a final product would function almost like a search engine where the user can type in their opinion, and through a processing of their natural language, it would return reputable and relevant resources based on their input. To simplify this for our purposes and to condense the massive corpus of the internet we condensed it down to 4 topics that are very simple but very highly debated, which you'll see soon. And we also, one of our algorithms employed Python's natural language toolkit, NLTK, which is a starter kit for natural language processing. And it's meant to depict the natural language processing that would go into curating the actual opposite output for the user. In our demo, we're just using a series of questions to gauge the opinion of the user on that topic. So let's say I'm really passionate about pineapple on pizza. So I can choose that topic and answer a few questions to gauge which way I'm leaning. Let's say I don't like pineapple, I don't like savory sweet combinations of food, but I do like pizza. So the algorithm would, in theory, output results that give me positive evidence for why I should try pineapple on pizza, or at least to get me to try to understand why some people might like pineapple on pizza. And then the user can choose again any of the different topics. It can be really difficult to research an opposing argument, and a lot of people don't even know where to start. So ThinkCircle would make it a lot easier for people to get a full picture of the debate of whatever they're interested in, even when things aren't super black and white. And it can close the gap between extreme points of view so that people could have more educated and respectful conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great job.
So how do you think you'd be able to draw people to using this? Like, how do you think you'd be able to open people's minds to even engaging with a platform like this?
Yeah, so right now I think there's different groups of people. Some people who are very dedicated to researching topics on their own, which obviously don't need a platform like this, and they'll go and do the research. But I know from experience and talking to a lot of other people, it can be very difficult to even know what to search when looking at an opposing argument when you don't even know what the opposing argument is. So people who are interested in learning more about things or even knowing what the other side might be saying or what the other discourse around that certain topic is would be very interested in using a platform like this.
How do you select the topics? I mean, based on what the user has, based on the user's input. But some of the views might be just like too deeply ingrained in me, which I may not even like want to discuss. So.
Sorry, could you repeat that last part?
Yeah. So what I'm saying that in the set of topics, are these just guided by what the user inputs on like a broad set of questions?
So this is our demonstration of, instead of using the corpus of the entire internet, which is the like final grand idea of this platform, where a user would be able to input pretty much anything and then get reputable, pre-screened reputable and relevant sources of the opposite viewpoint. And we just wanted to demonstrate this by picking some tedious topics or trivial topics to display that.
Yeah, so as you're scaling this and engaging in topics where, like, not to say cats versus dogs is not controversial, but it might get a little more partisan. I'm wondering how you would handle selecting the links that you're promoting. So there was a really good piece that came out in Integrity Institute this week looking at Instagram versus Google search. If you search anorexia on Google search, you tend to get directed towards public health websites, NIH, HHS, Cleveland Clinic. Whereas if you search the same thing on Instagram, you end up with a bunch of pro-anorexia content, and that's, like, there's very technical differences as to what they're promoting. So in the interest of, like, hopefully landing more like the Google results and less like the Instagram results, technically, how would you identify these are the reputable resources we want to promote?
That's a great question. So our idea is to use something like, there's already existing formats of this, like for example, Google Scholar only returns reputable sources or articles from .edu links or different organizations that are reputable. So our goal is not to return like Twitter, people's tweets about what they think about these things. It's supposed to be things with sources, things with references. And also, the way that we would be using this for the natural language processing purpose is every word has a semantic meaning, and there's also, you can vectorize words, and you can just see what words are kind of in the same cloud, like area on a graph numerically. So it would return, and you also using the sentiment analysis for each word. So for example, if someone inputs, I love dogs, it'll identify dogs as the word, and then they love dogs, that's the sentiment of what they believe, what their opinion about dogs is, and then it would search the internet for which words are most likely used in conjunction with dogs. So let's say cats, for example, and then because the sentiment is that they love dogs, maybe it'll output results as to why cats are better than dogs or why dogs might not be the best pet for you, etc. So it would be using a combination of the sentiment analysis and semantic meaning of the words.
18 seconds, anyone?
I mean, I was going to get into the controversial Steelers versus Eagles, but it's probably good you stay away from that at this point.
You answered the questions, so.
That's great. All right, thank you so much. Excellent, excellent.
Thank you.
All right, well, follow us up with another impressively named team. Scary Women is coming up next. It's also a great time for everyone to get up and stretch if you need a second.
My name's Diana Randall.
And I'm Emily Vise.
And our project is on doxing. So what is doxing? Doxing is the act of collecting and publishing a person's private information online without their consent. This can include your home address, your real name, your job, your phone number, or even your family. Now, who is impacted by doxing? There are 4.8 billion global social media users. And out of this, 43 million Americans have been doxxed. This results in 90% of people fearing being doxxed and 73% limiting what they post out of fear of being doxxed.
So how do we plan on mitigating this online hate? So we have 3 approaches. One is empowerment, so really focusing on empowering victims of online harassment. Second is fostering community. So oftentimes something that's really strong within online hate groups is a sense of community. So kind of transforming that relationship between community and government and finding a new way to make people that are doing online harassment kind of feel included. And finally, rehabilitation. So we really want to promote a long-term solution as opposed to oftentimes kind of a metaphor of like putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. So we really want to create something that is giving us a more inclusive community in the long term. So 3 ways that our policy hopes to do that is through dialogue. So an example could be, but not limited to, victim impact panels. So really talking to these victims and seeing the emotional and physical impact that doxing and online harassment can have. Restitutions, so that could be in the form of interactive modules or educational workshops. So this is really kind of fostering that sense of empathy and understanding the historical implications of online hate groups and how that has really created this very negative community. And then obviously community, so building new relationships that kind of focus on the grounds of inclusion, empathy, and understanding. So 3 communities that we kind of predict that is going to be impacted by this greatly. So A, marginalized communities. So marginalized communities are disproportionately impacted by online doxing threats. So women, groups, non-binary, people of color, LGBTQIA+. So all of these groups are disproportionately impacted. And then obviously we have online hate groups. So oftentimes perpetrators are associated or affiliated with these groups, and they really promote harassment and threats against one another. So against each other. And then finally, the justice system. So hopefully implementing these policies related to online harassment can also impact other areas of the court system that can focus on restorative justice policies, because those do help in the long term. So in conclusion, fostering online positive communities and online literacy hopefully give increased digital privacy for all users.
All right, fantastic.
Okay.
Questions?
What role do the social media networks or bigger tech companies play in this? How can they be most effective in kind of partnering with government or the regulatory body to achieve this?
So social media networks would need to provide transparency. Obviously, the people doing the doxing, they would have to work with these regulatory forces to provide the people doxing their information and work with them to getting, like punishment for that crime. And currently, I actually breezed past this in the presentation, but there are 8 current bills introduced in the Senate and Congress on this, but there are no bills in place currently. And of these bills, they are specifically for healthcare workers, federal employees, and other specific groups, but none for all of us. So.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So you addressed in your policy paper that if doxing uses the mail right now, questionable how effective doxing via the mail would be. There's grounds for prosecution, but if it uses the internet, really there's nothing. So I'm wondering, for somebody to land in one of these educational programs, are you viewing it as an opt-in sort of process, or absent legislation that actually criminalized online doxing, like how does somebody get into this program?
I would say the easiest way for us to do it is victim reporting. So if you are doxxed, you probably know that you were doxxed. And yeah, sometimes when you're doxxed, it's not a big deal, but when it's these severe cases where it impacts your family, it impacts your career, or just your general privacy, that's when the victim needs to come forward and work with the law enforcement to get these protections.
I know that the policy is kind of aimed to be non-punitive and more focused on restorative. Is there any punitive element you see belonging here, or is it purely restorative justice?
I think the main focus is to kind of use restorative justice policies, but obviously there can be some punitive measures, or I think it's really important to have that open line of communication between the community and the government, which is why we thought it was really important to kind of implement these sort of like conversational panels, like victim impact panels, just to kind of gain an understanding and put everybody at the same level, really try to get these people that are committing these are crimes, you know, you are threatening people, and this isn't something that you can just kind of slap on the wrist or just hopefully pay a fine and move on and continue on with your life. So I think that's really, really important, that kind of pushing for that understanding, and if that does mean some sort of punitive measure, then hopefully like we can all come to that conclusion like at the same time.
Yeah, our goal is to treat the root cause of the problem rather than the symptoms, because these people who are perpetrating this are still hateful unless you fundamentally change their perspective with empathy and understanding.
Yeah, on the restorative part of this, I mean, obviously one of the biggest problems with doxing is that once this information is out there, it's very hard to bring back. Do you see kind of any broader roles, and I apologize I wasn't able to get through all the memo, but do you see any other broader roles for the victim in terms of what they might be able to gain other than a sense of justice for having confronted?
So currently, House Bill 3547, this is the Doxing Threat Assessment Act. This is only introduced, but this is specifically for federal employees, but this allows these employees access to Homeland Security's full resources to get this information taken down. So we see this federal precedence maybe carrying over into like citizens and non-federal employees eventually, but since it's just introduced, it definitely needs some work.
Thank you so much. That's great. All right, we have Ifeoluwa Alusoga. Whenever you're ready.
Hi everyone, I'm Aoife, and my presentation is on .mission prevent hate, or .mp3. So MP3 takes audio and video files and extracts the audio, and the audio is then converted into text with speech recognition AI, and the text is then analyzed with semantic analysis, text extraction, and predictive modeling. My theory of change is you can't be a bystander, you have to be an upstander. In online gaming, a lot of people don't think they can do much because of how common hate speech is and the lack of efforts gaming companies have put into enforcing voice chat rules. Most of the rules are only enforced with text chats because there's solid evidence of hate speech being said, but the most horrendous things are said in voice chats. And that's why MP3 was created, to motivate people to take action against this surge of hate we see and hear online. So this is just what the website kind of looks like, and then the submission file, where you can upload audio or video file, and then it also asks what game this occurred on, and if applicable, what is your server region? And those questions are mainly for statistics, and also the server region question takes accents into consideration. And this is just the AI that would be included in this. Like I said, there would be speech recognition AI and natural language processing, semantic analysis to understand the context of the words and phrases, text extraction to, of course, get the actual hate speech, and predictive modeling to recognize what other words are mentioned with the hate speech. For inclusion, the users would mostly be online gamers who specifically use voice chat, and the efforts to engage users would just consist of feedback forms, beta testing, and surveys, because to get actual thoughts on the website, you would, of course, have to have people use it first. And why is MP3 so important? Well, the main goal is to, of course, decrease the amount of hate speech in online gaming and voice chats, But then it's just a website right now, but it would be further implemented into actual online games. So instead of submitting a file on the website, you could just submit a report on the game, and the algorithms would then analyze the time frame the hate speech occurred, and if there is hate speech in the clip, then the player will receive an appropriate penalty instead of being able to leave the game scot-free and continue to spread more hate.
All right, thank you so much. That was great. I love the .mp3, good throwback to,
Speech-to-text methods are often far from accurate, and they also don't perform very well when people are using code switching. I mean, they are switching between multiple languages within the same conversation. And this is like an AI connected with another AI application where you are getting the transcript from the speech-to-text, then using natural language processing. What if the speech-to-text methods introduce some errors, like things that the person did not even say? How are you going to deal with those kind of situations?
If there's something that's in the text that the person didn't say, well, if it's translated from speech directly to text, I wasn't thinking of if it would be translated where there's words added. There could be mistranslations, of course, but then it would all be analyzed with the other AIs.
Will taking like the history of the user into account, will that help? Like if there is a user who never said something very offensive, and suddenly the ASR system probably makes an error, if you just keep in context what the user has said for the entire duration of her presence in the forum, will that help?
Are you asking if the user never said anything offensive and it's still... Yeah, so if they didn't say anything offensive, then it just won't be analyzed because they'll take into consideration if there is actual hate speech in the audio.
No, I'm saying that like ASR systems errors, if there is an error in the system, and if you look at the history of the user before and you never see that the user was offensive, like could that help tackling this kind of errors? Because you can look back at the history and say that, no, this user hasn't used any offensive word before, so it could be the mistake from the speech-to-text method, something like that, just to make it more robust.
Sorry, I'm not really understanding your question.
Okay. We will follow up on that.
Perhaps somewhat related, but maybe a bit more tangible. So if the whole idea is that I'm able to go ahead and report somebody, another way that I could maybe be hateful would be to report people unnecessarily. What do you think would be the mechanism to be able to limit the ability for somebody to just constantly barrage the system with misrepresentations, misreports?
I guess if someone is reporting someone and then the clip is analyzed and there's no hate speech, then they would of course receive a message like you reported someone but there wasn't any hate speech in the clip, and if they exceed that a certain amount of times, then they would receive the penalty instead. But I wouldn't want it to be too restrictive because I still want to motivate people to, of course, report the hate speech that they're hearing. So I wouldn't want there to be like, you can only report someone 3 times.
Other questions?
I was just gonna say, I appreciate your attempt to like do the multimedia content as opposed to just text. Like, I think that probably is technologically more challenging, but given the dynamic of the platforms is like necessary. Are you envisioning this more as the event has already occurred, the onus is on the user to report, or would you eventually look to build it towards something that's like real-time monitoring so that it could react in real time when hate speech is present?
I was aiming for it to be something that already has occurred and then someone reports them because for it to be listening to a whole voice chat of games that can consist of hours, it would be kind of unnecessary to listen to all of that. So it would be better if there was just a specific time frame for it to analyze.
Thank you so much. All right, Harmony Hacktivists, you're up. You're going to sing? Is that where the harmony is referring to?
Hacktivists, and we chose to implement our tone tag commenting system. So our technology aims to express empathy and understanding within the comment section of social media platforms by incorporating a tone tag experience, user experience. We focused on the issue of disproportionate impact and social cohesion through understanding others' intentions without disrupting the natural human-centered technology patterns. We found these 3 points in our primary and secondary research that aided in the creation of our problem statement, such as online hate involves a participating audience and speech that is emotionally driven.
So from our research, we created this problem statement to focus on solving. Social media users need a reminder that comments are opinions with varying delivery because people who comment with misunderstandings can perpetuate harmful and uneducated debates. We chose to allow users to express the delivery of their words in comment sections through tone tags. A tone tag is a short abbreviation that is typically appended to the end of an online message that can help express the delivery of the message in a digital space where it's hard to explain cadence or intonation. So the user would be able to write their comment and select this icon. They would be able to select a tone tag. When they send their comment, they would be able to view their own tone tag, view others' tone tags, and view a short blurb about what their role is in consuming online comments.
In doing so, we also thought about the community inclusion. We wanted our design to include for a variety of groups and users who are all impacted in some way of online hate. We were informed through research through research with our peers to focus on our direction on mitigating trending hate speech in comments, as well as to protect observers who might exist and create in this space as well. So in doing this, we wanted to take into account commenters, observers, and then also how we could, in addition to that, aim to empower communities and stakeholders to be able to speak out in this. We also thought of our ethical considerations. We recognize that hate speech is included in this and that there are emotionally driven statements that have unintended consequences that we just could not explore in this time frame. This process is iterative, and we would love to, in the future, run testing to get feedback on the effects of how the wording within our tone tag feature would impact its use and also the reaction and adoption of this as a feature in social media across different platforms. And just to conclude, this matters because social media, as we... Oh.
You can finish your sentence.
Social media is reflective, and our goal is just to provide a tool that can speak to that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as a starter question, a lot of people use emojis, of course, to try to indicate tone. So how do you see this either playing with or differing from that kind of usage?
Tone tags are actually already in use. They're just something that we wanted to integrate within social media platforms to encourage their use. So emojis are typically facial expressions and like objects that their meaning might be a little bit inconsistent to interpret. And tone tags are really, I think their main focus where they were being developed was to focus on the autistic community that have trouble interpreting social cues. So being able to have a written physical, this is what I mean, is very helpful for internet users.
I like this presentation a lot. Going forward, do you think that we can actually use tone tags to create like what kind of content I want to view on the web space. Say, suppose that I just want positive tones or like something like that. Can I do that? And do you think that's a useful extension of this idea?
Yeah, I do. I think this is a basic iteration, but I think it has potential of either a filtering system or to be able to use even educational to like get another perspective and learn what someone else's intent is. I think it's great in facilitating discussion that allows somebody to have the opportunity to learn without people becoming super defensive within the comment sections, because it provides a space for people to openly come with their intent in a form of written communication that you don't get that in. And I think it would be cool to see what the potential of like filtering to see those tags would be.
Sorry, I quickly wanted to also add, one of the ethical considerations that we had considered with promoting content that is tagged as positive or genuine is that people will always abuse the system. So one of the reasons that we chose not to implement or mention promoting positive or genuine contact was because that we didn't want people to forcibly abuse this. We just want this to be integrated in a part of their commenting and their daily social media usage.
One super last thing just on that, I'm really sorry. So I think it's interesting that like liking a comment, that's what you see like in social media, like it's about the interaction. So I almost feel as though moving forward that it can, if there's a certain amount of, you know, tone tag that has one thing, maybe you filter it to see what certain tone tags you want to view more likely. Sorry about that.
That's actually all very relevant to a follow-up question that I had, which was, would people be able to create their own tone tags, and how would you kind of monitor to ensure people weren't abusing that system as a means of subverting what you're trying to establish?
We would like to keep the tone tags integrated, just be monitored by like social media platforms, only because having a consistent, what we would like to see in the future is all social media platforms using this. So having a consistent language and vocabulary that people are used to across all social media platforms would be really great for the user experience.
And as they are right now, they're like a universal tag that people would have to learn, so there would be a pop-up there to explain what they are. But that is also the difference as going back to the emojis, those are more interpretive, and this would just be more communicative of the intent behind it.
And we're just trying to keep the like natural human-centered technology, like making it as natural as possible, not trying to go too far away from what the social media platforms already have within itself.
Perfect. Well done. All right. Great job. All right. Rachel Harris, you're up.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Harris. By day, I'm a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon University, though today I'm a lead consultant in presenting to you, stakeholders at X Corporation, how you can tackle hate speech on your forum with our hate speech indicator. As a brief agenda, we'll begin with our background and problem statement, move into our policy recommendations, and conclude with our policy outcomes. 500 million tweets are made each day on X's forum, though 60% of them contain hate speech. Of these 300 million tweets made every single day that contain hate speech, only 30% are actively acted upon by X. So together, how can we increase the number of acted upon tweets per day? And the answer is using our hate speech indicator. As for the policy recommendations, we have two key components. The first is the technical controls, which is our hate speech indicator, and the second are our additional measures. Starting with our hate speech indicator, it's made of two components. The first is a sentiment score, which is the average sentiment of a user's post. The second is the number of times that a user makes a post containing terms or phrases that are found in the hate speech lexicon, which is an online database of nearly 4,000 terms and phrases in a user's native language that are considered hate speech. Our additional measures include policy measures. The first two are updates to our terms and conditions. The first is an acknowledgement clause for existing and new users such that they will know what our new controls are. The next is a transparency clause to ensure that these controls have a permanent place in our terms and conditions. We will also have a first warning such that when a user reaches such a low threshold, they will receive a permanent notification banner in their notification settings that should they continue on this path, they will receive banning from the platform. However, if they turn this around and start to improve their sentiment score and decrease the number of times that they tweet from the hate speech lexicon, they can improve this and no longer be banned. We also will have the prevention of platform hopping such that when a user is banned, we will retain their username, name, and email address such that they cannot make a new fake account to return to the platform and continue to promote hate speech, nor will they be able to move to other platforms and register with that existing name and email address so that they would not be able to promote hate speech on other platforms. We will also have a repeals process because the average sentiment score and hate speech lexicon are controls that would mitigate for sarcastic, out of context, or facetious tweets. We also expect that there would be out of extraneous circumstances that we'll be able to address with our repeals process. As for our outcomes, we expect that this will receive a 99% return on investment after 10 years. We also expect that hate speech will decrease from 60% to just under 40%, and the revenue increase will increase about 1.85% now that the platform is no longer a place to promote hate speech. I'd like to thank my advisor, Elise Silva, and also say hi to my grandma who's watching the live stream online.
Great job. All right, great work.
So I think this is very well put together and very well argued. My main question is, you targeted your policy memo to Elon Musk. I briefly suggested, I was like, should we be in character? Which would probably just end in like nonsensical screaming. Elon Musk has been pretty upfront about the fact he calls himself a free speech absolutist, and when he bought it, Twitter actually had more protections in place against hate speech than it does today. I don't think it lined up with your exact suggestions. But so like keeping your audience in mind, how would you make the case to Musk of all people that like he actually needs to take hate speech seriously as opposed to letting the dumpster fire continue?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for your question. So although, as you've pointed out, Elon Musk is a free speech activist, in 2022, the company put out a new diversification agenda. So they wanted to increase diversity and inclusion in their workplace. And my argument, and as you can see, it's outlined in one of the appendix sections, is that this cannot be an agenda just for the workplace. You need to promote these same values on your forum, and because each hate speech tweet is reviewed on a case-by-case basis, our automatic controls allow for this to be a space for more platform. Also, if we acknowledge the fact that Elon Musk is much more interested in the revenue than maybe promoting a safe space online. Like I said before, we would see an increase in 1.85% of revenue. This is because about 50% of advertisers left the platform when he took over because he allowed accounts that were previously banned to be back on Twitter. So those advertisers left. Now that they would be coming back to the platform because the user base has increased and because there's no longer hate speech on the platform, we would see an increase in revenue. That's one of the other things that I would argue to Musk as well.
You talk about your sentiment score, which I think is really smart to base this on. How do we make sure the sentiment score is sort of neutral and agreed upon by the like Elon Musks over here and the say Greta Thunbergs over here?
Exactly. So part of that also is the hate speech lexicon, again, which is provided by an independent third party. But the sentiment score would also be done by IBM Watson's natural language processing. And this is because IBM Watson is one of the only large-scale AI models that can detect sentiment in a user's native language. So this is an outside third party that obviously would come in and analyze the sentiment. We would not leave that up to Elon Musk, although it is his company.
If a user posts an objectionable content in one platform, you say that the user will not be able to join another platform. But these different platforms have varying standards of like what is objectionable and what is not. How do you see to resolve that?
So obviously an ideal situation would be that we would record again the user's username, name, and email address that they used on the account that was banned, and we would submit that to an external third-party database, which is hopefully hashed and encrypted such that nobody else can see this data. But the idea is that in an ideal world, other platforms, before allowing a user to register online, would check this database, would query it to make sure that that email address is not found in there, and if it is, they wouldn't be allowed to proceed forward. For example, similarly to how when you register for a new app, they check to make sure that your password hasn't been used in other compromised data breaches.
Follow-on question. Would this also apply to your comments or just your original X's?
So I keep calling them tweets, that's my apologies, but it would apply to anything that you post on your profile, and this is because although we cannot take down the tweets in the moment to prevent hate speech in the moment as it is happening, we would then take down the user's account, so anything would be removed from that account, the original posts and the comments.
Could you respond to somebody who says this is a great solution and a foolproof way to make Twitter better or X better, but it's going to, drive the cesspool elsewhere and make it worse?
Yes, so in the appendix, there's also a section on why individually X should be doing this, and this is partially because, and I recognize I'm almost out of time, this is partially because X is one of the few platforms that isn't owned by the Meta family, and so because they still have a large percentage of the market share, they should be doing this, and although it would push the cesspool elsewhere, again, those users won't be able to register because of their email address. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you.
Well done. All right, we're down to the last two. We are doing great, everybody. Dukes Against Hate. You are up. I just want to give a shout out to Jamie Scanlon for her timer over on the side for keeping us on task this year. Those of you that came last year knew that was one of the hardest parts, was keeping things actually on a good timer last year. So it was really nice.
All right. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maximilian Hopfer, and this is Chris Perumal, and we're going to present to you our project, a bias detector in news articles. So we want to be very clear about it. We want to have a Chrome extension or a browser extension where our project runs in, but we are not directly checking for bias. We're going to give the user different viewpoints from other geographical locations on the world that can be perceived as biases in the country where you look at them.
So the way it works is, say, for example, I'm just reading a news article online and I open my extension. It would then scan the current article for certain keywords, search all over the internet for similar news articles using those same keywords, analyze, filter them, and then send them to artificial intelligence, in our case, ChatGPT API, to detect bias or compare, summarize, and then send it back in a pretty format.
So we think a big opponent of hate is knowledge, and if you know it about each other and if you know about each other's different viewpoints, hate goes down. And we speak in first-hand experience because we both are international students and we sometimes call our relatives our parents, and they speak about the same things very different because the news outlets in the country give them different input. So we want to make this experience possible to everyone who is on the internet.
So this is just some screenshots from the demo that we currently have. As you see, it would scan and extract keywords in real time, which leads to a delay of 30 seconds to a minute as it processes. And then you would be able to, in the future, click those buttons to see what specifically articles from these countries, what they're talking about. And that's the same thing that is zoomed in a little bit better on the next slide. So currently, ChatGPT does a very good job, but we don't want to rely fully on it.
So, as I already mentioned, we think this is the intended user is everyone in this world who looks at articles, especially news articles. The only hard point on this is to say we need news, so in the future we want to use VPNs to go into geographical different location in the world and also have multilingual capabilities.
It can also be argued that there is some inherent bias when it comes to AI. We can reduce or combat this by using NLP techniques. We briefly researched topic modeling using different algorithms, and this is some of our results. We did not include it in our project because we couldn't implement it, not enough time, but there is existing research, and as a proof of concept, we know it is possible.
So as a conclusion, we think that our project is very marketable because the users is everyone who has internet access. We think it has a low cost because all you need is internet access in different geographical locations. and it's very simple but effective. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I enjoy this idea as somebody who spent some time overseas myself and still kind of regularly read from non-US sources. Obviously, though, the standards for journalism kind of vary across the world. So how might you deal with that? How might you indicate to users that, yes, this might be an opposing viewpoint, but it might be very tainted by some other aspect?
That's the whole point of this idea, is that for you to see that there are people who exist that have different viewpoints than your own. And it's a way for you to show, to see all of it in one place. Like, okay, this is what one person is saying about it, but you can also see, here's what someone else is saying about it, and that can kind of bring it down or equalize.
And often in other countries there is a different norm. So by NLP, what we shortly discussed, you can filter out what is the main bias or the main norm, which keywords are the most often used in articles in different countries. So you get some sort of a general idea, which we name bias, but a general viewpoint from another country compared to the general viewpoint in the US, for example.
There were some research papers that allowed us to detect outliers, and then we can control which articles are fed back into the system.
Okay, I think that last point is maybe going a bit more to what I was thinking. So certainly in some places, certain news outlets may actually be propaganda arms of their governments, for instance. I guess I was more getting to, how would you present all of these as kind of on the same level, or would there be, some indications? What would those be based on?
Currently, we would. We want people to be aware that there are so many different viewpoints. Some of it might be propaganda, some of it might not be. You make the decision.
How can this scale down to local news that often is, as we know in America, is narrowing, but often can be biased, but talking about events or point of views that are very specific to like local regions that may not have other comparisons? Is there a use for this?
I think it would be possible to scale it onto a smaller scale, but our main project was to give a world view and to give different. So it would be possible to scale this down and say I scrape the web geographically around Pittsburgh news, but it's not something we specifically looked into it.
And I would argue that it would still work, because this entire idea depends on the amount of news articles that you collect. So if you can collect a reasonable amount of local news articles and local coverage, then you can just perform some statistical analysis and then show it on the extension.
Yeah, I mean, mine's more of a comment, but in theory, if you could integrate tone analysis, that could also help it. I think this would also be a kind of interesting tool for journalists themselves before they publish something, to run their article through it. And hopefully most journalists are trying to be objective, but of course, like, they also have implicit biases because they're human. So it might be a good chance to kind of like check at the source.
Yeah, there's also some functionality that we don't really mention. If you compare it to other articles in the English space, you too see where are you compared in your region, or as a check, for example, for news journalists, you can use this, where is my article?
Situate yourself.
Correct. Where do I situate myself compared to my own? Although it's not really intended what we want to do, but it's somewhat a fact check too.
And are you planning to just like work on the granularity of one news article, or you want to also extend this to the whole outlet?
So it would be, it would augment the current news article that you're reading with ideas or perspectives collected or supported by other news articles from all over the world. So that's just the main selling point of this idea. And if I move to a next page, then it's that particular page's summary.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. That was great. All right, we are ready for the last, but certainly not least, presentation of the Goobers. Another just fantastic name. So make sure you take a break so we just, don't rush through this one. Give them adequate time. Everybody's done a really fantastic job today, so really, really appreciate all your hard work and patience in getting through all the work this afternoon.
Hi, so this is Ryan Block, Sam Haupt, and I am Paul Doherty, and this is our project. It is Hate Blocker. It is a Chrome browser extension that blurs any hate speech on web pages, and to do this, it uses a natural language API developed by Expert AI.
So our goal with this product was to promote digital well-being and create a more empathetic online space. And we can overall just make the internet a safer space by limiting the amount of hate speech seen by users and foster an online community that is marked by respect and overall just more inclusive. So the features of Hate Blocker are that it automatically blurs out hate speech that's detected by the API. You can hover over the words in order to unblur them. And this would be useful for parents who want to protect their children from harmful language, in which case we could add a toggle function for the unblur. And then also we wanted this to be educational so that it can inform users of language that they might not have been previously aware was considered hate speech.
All right, so before we get into the demo, I just want to give a warning that in order to show you guys this working in real time, we did have to include harmful text with normal text. All the harmful text was taken off social media, but it can still be considered triggering and very negative. So we included a quick video of it working in real time. So the extension runs off a backend that is hosted on my computer, which will not be if it is produced to the public. So once it is turned on and the page is refreshed, you can immediately see the blur start to take effect on the bad text. So I'm going to pause here so you can see. Demo website, example blog post, and You Are a Great Person is not blurred, but what is blurred are negative text. So if I continue, you can see when you hover over it, it says I hope you die, which is not good, so it is blurred. So just to show you how it's working, you can see in the back end it is flagging stuff that it finds to be negative. So this is not perfect. One major thing that we notice is that Expert AI's API isn't perfect at detecting hate speech, and a simple workaround would simply just be for us to create our own language model, whether that be hard-coded ourselves or using OpenAI's many AI creation tools. Another thing is that our idea is that this extension will work on social media platforms like X and Instagram, but right now those APIs are paid for and we don't have the funding for that, but it would be completely feasible, which is a little bit of money. And then one other thing we want to add is just to include a feature where users can see how much hate is being blocked a day. This is just educational, so it shows, how much hate they're really being exposed to that they weren't previously aware about. So with our extension, we hope that people can browse the internet and social media without having to worry about looking at potentially demeaning and derogatory text. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Curious, have you considered, especially given the target audience, that blurring out text could possibly increase interest in the text, so maybe perhaps draw attention where attention might not have been given before? How might you deal with that?
So yeah, so originally we had it just blur out the specific phrases that were flagged. So like ugly was flagged, so it would just blur out that, but then it would leave the rest of the phrase intact. And then that creates kind of like that, like, oh, what did they say? Or if it's a huge blog post with them talking about a bunch of different things, and at the end they include something that's derogatory, it blurs out the whole thing. I think because you're scrolling through Twitter, you're looking at replies and stuff, and you're seeing all these blurred, because there's a lot of negative comments. All the negative stuff that was on there was stuff that I saw just that day. So it just, the people installing it are people who just really don't want to see hate speech, so it's up to them. One way we could get rid of that is just having like a toggle, so they can't hover over it to see it, but they would have to go to the extension and turn it off.
Article about, Vladimir Putin saying something bad, or maybe Elon Musk. Let's go with Elon Musk saying something bad. Yeah. Is there a contextual filter that allows you to read what Elon Musk has said, even if it is akin to hate speech or negative text?
So wait, are you saying on like a blog post, like an article?
Yeah.
So originally our idea is just to work on mainly social media platforms, because we really don't want to be scraping data from a bunch of websites that the user is visiting, like they're visiting a ton of websites when they use Google. So that can be expanded to work with articles, and yeah, it would simply just blur the anything negative. But depending on the article, there's a lot of different like biases and tones that people write in. So that would be something that we'd need to work on with the language model, so that it would work better for articles.
Also, the API does give a category for the type of hate, so there could be a possible function in the future where you can toggle off certain categories.
I like the idea of like blurring portions of the text to make it a better user experience. But like if there is a long paragraph and the third and fourth line are blurred out, how do I know that, how do I make sense of the entire paragraph? Because maybe it's critical to know the content of the whole thing to make sense of that.
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Yeah, if there is a long paragraph and the third and fourth lines are blurred out, how do I understand the whole paragraph without learning about what was written in the third and fourth line?
So the way we have it set up is that it blurs out the whole paragraph because there was derogatory text. But considering that most like X tweets or posts and Instagram posts are short, if there's something derogatory in it, most of the time the rest of the stuff in it is not good, and they're just using it to hide, the negative things that they're saying.
Have you tested this while actually using Twitter or Facebook or something like that? You showed us sort of like a blog post.
Yeah, so right now Twitter, in order to do that, you need access to their API, and it costs about $100 a month. So for the sake of
You didn't feel like that was worth it just to test the...
Yes, but the way we have it set up, it should easily be integrated once we have access to that API.
Any other questions? All right, great work. Great work. Okay, and I'm gonna actually have one more round of applause to yourselves and the judges for sticking it out here. This was great. Okay, we are actually ahead of schedule here. I didn't schedule us to be breaking till 3:15. This is fantastic. So what's gonna happen here is you can take a break. You can go out there. The ice cream, I think, just got put out a few minutes ago. You can relax for a bit. I think the schedule has us coming back here at 3:45. So you got some time. Restrooms are just around the corner here. Get some food and relax. The Wi-Fi stuff is right over there. We'll come back in here at 3:45 for a conversation with the judges about online hate, and then we'll do awards after that. So thanks again, and take a break, and we'll be back after all that. Thanks so much. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you all for your patience and making it this far through the day. I know you're excited to get to the awards and all that other stuff, but I do want to talk for a few minutes. We have these fantastic judges here who have really paid very close attention to your presentation. I was very impressed as we were talking about them. They were able to go back and talk about all these various things in your presentation. So kudos for putting together great presentations. And really just thank you for the judges here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna introduce Susan Baida, who's the Executive Director for Collaboratory Against Hate, one of our great partners for this hackathon, and one of the main reasons why we keep talking about online hate here. Introduce her up to introduce herself, and then lead this fantastic conversation with our judges. So Susan, welcome up to the front. Yeah, walk around that way.
Please applaud Dr. John Slattery for putting together such a fabulous event today. Thank you so much. This was so well organized and coordinated. My name is Susan Bida. I'm the Executive Director of the Collaboratory Against Hate. And for those of you who are not aware of our academic center, we are a partnership actually between Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh. And we are part of the community response to the Pittsburgh synagogue tragedy in October of 2018. So the work we do is very meaningful in the realm of hate and trying to understand it in terms of the technology and the policy perspective. So this is a very exciting day for us to be in collaboration with Duquesne and with Pitt and CMU. So to get started, why don't we have each of the judges tell us about yourself, where you work, and how you approach the question of online hate. So why don't we start with you? Yes.
Sure. I'm Jess Kuntz. I'm the policy director at Pitt Cyber. I only joined Pitt Cyber this past summer, so I've been in my role for about 8-9 months now. And I came to Pitt Cyber by way of the State Department. I was a foreign service officer at State for about 7 years through the Trump and Biden administrations. And when I made the decision that I wanted to leave the Foreign Service, I honestly had like no clear sense of what I wanted to do. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, so I was like looking for a way to find my way back to Pittsburgh, stay in the policy space more broadly. Had done a lot of time in DC and like wasn't looking to get back to DC, so it's a little tricky to find a way to be like, what do you do that's policy related that isn't in Washington? And landed upon this role in Pitt Cyber, and one of the reasons it appealed to me, I remember joining State. We were the first class to have the hiring freeze lifted under the Trump administration and be sworn in. And getting to my first post in Tel Aviv, I moved the embassy to Jerusalem, and like being in this place where I was like, we're supposed to be diplomats and promoting diplomacy and like US foreign policy, but we're like doing this in this age where like nobody trusts government anymore, and like our traditional communication mechanisms aren't working. It felt like we were doing this like very old school diplomacy and means of public communication that just like wasn't fit for the times. The United States had just gone through the 2016 election, Brexit had preceded that, and it just felt like we were working in a way that didn't match the information ecosystem. And when your role is to persuade, like the ability to evolve the ways in which you persuade and the like mechanisms you use to do that is so important. So it felt like something that for the 7 years I was with State was always kind of like influencing our effectiveness or lack thereof in some cases, was just the fact that it was like 20th century diplomacy in the 21st century. So that's who I am. And then in terms of what Pitt Cyber does and how my work intersects with online hate. So I mean, I come to this from the perspective of how does the technologies that we use in our day-to-day life, as well as emerging technologies, impact the governance institutions and then social institutions that affect all of us in kind of a less like harder to get your hands around kind of way. So there's a reason we're on the policy side. I'm so impressed by those of you who can actually like build these tools, because I'm like, wow, I can make suggestions, but I can't execute on them always. But yeah, I think I come to it from more kind of like the socio-technical lens in terms of like, what does this mean for our greater society and mean for our democracy and cohesiveness as a society?
Jessica, thank you. And Chad, it's so nice to meet you here at long last. I know we were introduced through Catherine Augustine at RAND. So please tell us who you are, about yourself, where you work, and how you approach the question of online hate.
Thank you. So Chad Heisenreiter, as was mentioned, I'm with the RAND Corporation. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's a federally funded research and development center. We do work primarily for Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and other federal agencies. I am fairly new to RAND. I came just in the last couple of years, and therefore I'm also fairly new to Pittsburgh, by the way. Came here just the last couple of years. I spent 20 years with the Air Force in the research laboratory system, where I was doing capability development. So doing a lot of the coding things that I am jealously sitting here and watching you all present. I did primarily cyber operations work, so defensive and offensive cyber and those sorts of technologies. I would say I was building them for a long time. Now I sit here and think about why we build them, and so my work at RAND is having a lot to do with force employment. What role does cyber have in some of the national security elements that we think about, in wartime or peacetime. A lot of work in acquisition, just how can we do this sort of work better, as well as a good deal of work that crosses over into AI because, well, who isn't doing AI, right? But no, there's obviously some very serious intersections there, and I had some experience with developing some of those sorts of capabilities. So that's kind of what I've been doing. In terms of how I approach this problem, I think about this a lot in two ways. Given that I'm primarily focused in my professional life with national security, I think about this a lot from the standpoint of what online hate does and how people can weaponize it against us. Probably, as you all may have caught on from my lines of questioning, I'm always thinking about how to break systems. I'm always thinking about how other people are going to try to help us break systems or try to force us to break systems, as it were, and how that benefits somebody. And so, I think it's a really important aspect. I appreciate all of you who answered my security questions and thought about all the bad actors out there. And so I think that part's important. But, I'm also a father of three. And, generally speaking, and like to think of myself as a good member of society who has done work with state and other folks. And like probably many of you who are technical, I operate as the IT support for large members of my family or large portions of my family. And so, I am constantly faced with a lot of the practicalities of this. I've got kids that range from 11 to 23, and figuring out when and how they should use technology, what is safe to expose them to, how to make them, good and honest citizens while not sheltering them so much that they can't function in everyday society. Those are all questions that I grapple with, and I appreciate that you all, took those questions seriously and try to propose real solutions. So kudos to you all.
Thank you. Annie, thank you for joining us all the way from Harrisburg. And please.
Any opportunity to leave Harrisburg, I'm like, all right, get out of here.
But yes, tell us about yourself and where you work, how you approach the question of online hate.
Yeah, I'm Annie Newman. I'm Governor Shapiro's Director of Digital Strategy. Harrisburg is miserable, but I do love my job and working for the governor. So two different things. So in that role, I'll start with saying we are the first office of digital strategy in the Pennsylvania state government, which is really cool and a real honor. Before the governor took office, digital was limited to really like tweets, which we love the tweets. We love the tweets. But so much more. And it was limited to tweets under comms. And we pulled that out. I have a 7-person team. It's one of our largest. And we do all of our digital communications, digital partnerships, digital services, and AI technology policy. Which is really exciting. So in that, we kind of work all across with every agency and their digital teams, and then the Commonwealth's IT team. Something I never thought I would do would be work with IT, but I am obsessed with IT now. So that's a fun learning for my job, is that you love your IT people. Anyway, in kind of combating online hate and how we think about that, in my job, it's very much two different things. I have like the real privilege of getting to work both in policy and in politics, which I love. On the political lens, it's the understanding that online hate is here. Like, duh. And there's a way of, it is not, I don't work for Facebook, I don't work for Twitter. I need to still deliver my message and really show people why, they should vote a certain way or support a certain thing that I really strongly believe in. So how do I get around it, right? So I work a lot that's really motivated a lot of our influencer work, our external partnerships, in working with trusted messengers that are not necessarily politicians, in trying to overcome that online hate. But then there's also the policy aspect, which is a really amazing thing to get to be a part of and to think about these big questions that you guys just spent a week thinking about, working really closely with our policy team on how to do this, on what role the state can play, on what regulations, what kind of communications aspects we can do, and working with a really nimble and kind of flexible team to figure that out. So it is, it's really cool, and really glad to be here with you guys.
Thank you. Ashik, thank you for being here today. And yes, I just want to say to Ashik to thank him very much for, you're not only part of our collaboratory work group and also esports research that we're doing, but also this. So thank you for your engagement. And if you could please, I know you're with the University of Rochester, but if you could also talk about your affiliation with CMU.
Yeah, so I started actually my career very differently. I was a very serious machine learning researcher doing PhD at CMU, and also in parallel I was a poet. I published 3 collections of poems. So I was doing like social justice as a poet, and I was doing serious machine learning as a machine learning researcher, and I just thought that why not combine both? And that's how I started getting interested in at the intersection of social science and natural language processing and machine learning. And right now I'm an assistant professor at Rochester Institute of Technology. My research actually is very relevant to online toxicity. One line of research I focus on how to build more robust methods to understand the current US political polarization. And one of our findings was that we found that different words mean very different to the Republicans and Democrats. And you can actually use machine translation methods that are used to translate, say, English into Spanish or Spanish into German. You can actually use them to translate conservative English to liberal English. And you can create pairs like solar and fossil. And you exactly know that there is a difference of opinion about what should be the source of energy. Or Trump-tard and snowflake. So it's a very simple technique, but you can actually create this kind of pairs where you exactly see how these two communities use different words, but in very similar context. In the second line of work, I work on international politics, and there I have focused on how to use positive content to counterbalance hate. Say if there is a conflict between nuclear adversaries, India and Pakistan, or if there is online attack against the refugee community, how can we detect positive content and emphasize them so that the hate can be counterbalanced? And in the final line of work, no prize for guessing, I work with generative AI, and there I try to see how unintended biases and harms can be used with generative AI. So one line of work, we just found that even chess discussions, like people are saying that the white knight is attacking the black queen because of the presence of words like black, white, kill, capture, threat. Some of them just get misclassified as hate speech. And one actual YouTube streamer's YouTube stream actually got taken down by YouTube because of that. So we have also seen that speech-to-text recognition systems where, say, a kid is saying that I want to go to market and I want to buy corn, and the speech-to-text system generates, I want to buy porn. So this kind of unsafe transcription can occur. And finally, we have seen that large language models, we just have a paper out, 9 large language models, very well-known models, they can generate arbitrarily hateful, anti-Semitic, misogynistic, and toxic content. So that's broadly the kind of research that I do in this space.
Thank you all so much, and welcome again. We have just a few questions, so I'm going to pose this to any one of you who want to take this question on. But in working on this issue broadly, and with the advent of AI, I mean, we held this competition same time last year, and AI wasn't such a prominent topic of this, I think, the competition, and it is this year, right? So what do you all think, or one of you think is, or what do you think are the biggest upcoming challenges in the realm of online hate?
I think the biggest challenge will be how generative AI can be used by bad actors. And you can use it for like political warfare. You can just use disinformation campaign. All these kind of things can be done at scale. And also some of these models, we just had a very simple setting where we asked a large language model that I'm going to give you a stereotype. Say some countries people are nice or some countries people are not nice. And we requested the model, can you make it more toxic? And at the same time, the model's filters are set that you should not generate anything that is too harmful. Whatever it generates, we feed the model back again and say, can you make this more toxic? And in like 3-4 steps, it can say that certain communities should be rounded in concentration camps, or certain group of people should be completely denied of any health benefit, or should be even euthanized. And the model does not even evaluate any of these things as problematic. So when we are dealing with this kind of rich and powerful and expressive models that cannot even evaluate its own content, and bad actors can simply leverage those kind of things to create a lot of online strife. So I think that's one of the major concerns that I have.
I obviously completely agree. I think you're 100% right. And I'd add on to that that politically, I mean, I don't need to tell anyone how, like insanely divided and hard each side has become. In that combat, a lot of the solutions to combat online hate, to regulate or even understand the type of research and AI that you're talking about falls on deaf ears for a lot of people for a variety of reasons. And it makes it really, really hard to gain any ground there. On top of that, we have by nature, our politicians and our leaders, many of whom are amazing. I work for someone who I believe is awesome at this, and that's part of the reason why I work for him. Many of whom don't understand it and don't want to, right? And I wouldn't go so far as to say it's because they're older or younger or men or women, but for a lot of different reasons, that's not where they came from. We have like 3 scientists in Congress. I'm not one of them, so I wouldn't even know. But it is a huge challenge to execute on the problems that we see in this research. I think it is possible. I absolutely think it can be done. But I think there's a lot of different tools that we need to put in place to get there. I really believe that Pennsylvania is putting them in place, and I'm very proud of that. But Pennsylvania isn't everywhere. So that's something that scares me a little bit.
That is such a fascinating idea, the fact that maybe with what's happening, that we might see more scientists in government, right? Yeah. I think it would probably be very advantageous.
Yeah, you guys should think about it.
I'll also chime in with 2 things. So the one thing I think that hasn't been mentioned that I worry about a lot is just the ease and quality with which deep fakes targeting individuals can be produced. Obviously, there's the concern on politics, but for a while now, we've taken the approach of like, we need to teach youth like what safe online behavior looks like any picture you post online can always come back and haunt you, et cetera. We're now in an era when like they didn't even have to take the photo or the video. It can be completely fabricated. You combine that with the prospect of monetization that you reach out and say like, hey, I've created this video of you, I'm gonna leak it online unless you send me $1,000. When we talk about online hate, it's not necessarily like these are bad actors and that they wanna cause harm. It could just be they're looking to make a quick buck and they're in a foreign country and they can't be extradited, and like, how do you stop that? And that is like one heck of an awful, wicked problem that like deeply worries me. The other thing I would say in response to like maybe we'll have more scientists in government, I hope so. But I think the one thing we're missing on our panel of judges today is somebody from industry. And not to be negative from the policy side, but my suspicion is we are very much in an era, and we will continue to be in an era, when there will be some action from government, but maybe less than we would like to see, and it will continue to be the choices made inside these platforms and these corporations that will have like dramatic effects on the world and the society and the governments we all live in. That's not necessarily how I would have designed things, but I think that's the world we're living in right now. So I would encourage those of you who are like interested in this enough that you would like to explore a career in it, to like think about going into industry, but like be the conscience for those companies. Like that is a hard position to be in, but like, man, do we need them. Like, not speaking on behalf of Pitt Cyber, but like, don't go replicate Mark Zuckerberg. Like, be the higher person who's like, no, I see the impact that we have on the world, good and bad, and I'm gonna push for more of the good and less of the bad.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add to what everybody said. I fully endorse. I think the one thing that maybe I would say from my perspective is, and this maybe could fall on what you were saying, is that there's also a very strong chance or likelihood or probability that these things can also be weaponized in various different ways. That I think is the thing that worries me the most, and the thing that I kind of deal with day to day. And that those bad actors aren't just perhaps cyber criminals or other sorts of things, but even other people that would intend to do us harm. a lot of cyber attacks now have some sort of misinformation, disinformation aspect to them that kind of amplifies it. And so not only is it important that we think about these systems and the harms that they cause, but we think about how we build these systems. One of the big problems I've done most of my research on has been, how do you balance that? I need to get this out because the marketplace works by getting technologies out to the marketplace. But the faster I do that, the less controls that I have on it, and then I end up in a very bad situation for some unintended consequences. And how do I balance that with my responsibilities ethically as a technology provider or as a government in terms of making sure that those things can't be misused in that way, especially in these very strange ways that we're starting to see now.
Great, thank you all very much. And Jessica, I think we were trying to get industry here, but I think given the scrutiny that they faced in recent weeks, maybe they weren't too enthusiastic about being judges on this panel.
One congressional grilling was enough. They were like, thank you, we're out. I mean, I have mixed feelings on it. So I have so many former State Department colleagues who have gone to work for X and TikTok and Meta, and I think a lot of them are drawn by the free food and the free organic berries and the cappuccino makers, I'm not gonna lie. But I've talked to a lot of them, and they generally have had very good experiences in those companies. I think it's a tough line to you don't drink the Kool-Aid, but you still need to fit into the company. So I think it's an interesting career path to explore. What I'd like to see is we see more people moving between industry and the policy government side more regularly, because there's value in both. And for one side to view the other as the evil bad doer is a problem. But yes, I'm sure some of them would love to come, but it's one of those where they're it's hard to say not on behalf of my employer.
Well, thank you all for that. And, today we, speaking of opportunities, I think that's my next question is about, what are the opportunities that you all see in this space? We certainly heard some really innovative opportunities here today. So I'll put that question out to you next.
Yeah, I'll say just on something that I found really cool in government, especially as a younger person who does not come from a science background. I did political campaigns before this. I always worked in digital, but I don't know how to do the coding that you guys showed today. But and I mean this is really specific to kind of politics and in government, but there is a real really cool freedom in kind of nobody knows what's going on with AI. These guys do, but in government, nobody really knows. So it is really, you can be the person that knows. You can be the person that decides to lead that, whether that is, and hopefully you take that not as oh man, this is my time to be a dictator, but it's your time to build a really cool policy that's really thoughtful and get a team together of people that know more than you do to solve this problem. So I know that's kind of an opportunity in a more fluid sense, but I think it's a really cool time to work on these programs in government and policy, because you can take a little bit of the faith that oh my God, I don't think anybody really knows what they're talking about. And that's cool, because it means that you really can. So that's something that I found interesting in the last year.
Thank you. Anyone else want to take the question of opportunities
I think I'll second that. So it was a really hard move for me personally to kind of go from building things to going to thinking about why we build things. But I have found no lack of work to do. And incredibly great interactions with folks who have that kind of hard policy background, have international relations background, and to bring kind of my knowledge. And for us, I didn't realize how much I didn't know about that space, and I would like to think that they've walked away feeling the same. So it's a really, I think, exciting time to be at that nexus. And if you understand a little bit of technology and a little bit of the policy, I think there's no end to places that could make use of that knowledge base.
Yeah, I think there is a great opportunity for academia to stress test all these AI systems, because all these companies will tell that their large language model is the best or gives the most accurate answer or performs very well on some specific data set. So we have to, from academia, we have to audit or red team these applications to see if whatever are promised, if those things are delivered or not. And secondly, I think this is a very good time for people who are working on technical topics, be cognizant of whatever they're building, if that is serving the community they are building for. Like we just recently studied gender equality in Iran, and while we were doing that, we realized that there is no data set of gender equality where all the participants are women. I mean, even like there are many data sets where misogyny is just like annotated by men only. How do we know like if these data sets or if these systems are reflecting the values and opinions of the people that are going to be affected by the technology? So I think this kind of questions are very much in the wheelhouse of the academia, and they should be the voice of conscience for these like big companies and big techs finding this kind of blind spots and talking about that.
So my comments may be a little more industry specific less industry specific and more in terms of big thing, because I've been thinking about this a lot. I probably should have figured this out like a decade ago in my career, but somehow I'm like just getting into it now. But I think one of the things I've found very helpful, so two pieces. One, sometimes what you're best at is not necessarily what makes you tick, right? So you can be really good at something and not really get a lot of joy out of doing it. And it's perfectly fine to recognize that. This was one of the reasons I was able to leave the State Department. I eventually came to the realization that like, I can be a really good diplomat and still choose to walk away. That's okay, right? Like that, there's some like, just like being honest with yourself and saying like, sometimes I don't need to pursue what I'm best at. I can pursue what I'm just like most engaged by. And so building on that, what I've been thinking about a lot lately is I think we each need to decide, are you somebody who gets like the most engagement? Does it make you tick to think about like how things should be done, to be the ideas person and to be like taking the step back and thinking through like how ought the world to work, right? Am I the person who like writes the policy papers and makes the broad recommendations? So that's option one. Option two is, are you the person who takes the most joy from like rolling up your sleeves and getting it done? It's not to say there aren't roles in which you can be both, but I have found that in both foreign policy and tech policy, you tend to be one or the other. You tend to be more focused on the ideas and the like developing the broad notions versus the operationalizing. And in terms of like general career advice, I would say like figuring out like what makes you tick, just what makes you feel like most alive and most stimulated is so important. And it took me like far too long to like come to peace with that. I spent a lot of time like doing the thing that I was necessarily like best at. So I don't know if that answers the question directly, but assuming you're all in like undergrad or graduate school and figuring that at some point you'll graduate and have to go monetize your skills, hopefully that's helpful.
Jessica, that's the answer to the last question.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then like take a sneak peek at the questions in advance. That's the other thing.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
I was just going to add to that is that I really appreciate that. That resonates with me, and I want to add that it's okay not to know and to go try, right? So at least for me personally, I think, you know, I needed to go be the one rolling up my sleeves for a few years before I had the wherewithal to actually be at all decent with the thinking about why we do.
Great. Thank you all. Yeah, my last question is about what is the one thing students should know if they want to continue their work in this area? So that was a great answer to that question, I thought.
And then the one thing I'd add further is if you decide like you are really passionate about technology design and how that interacts with society, I feel like the one thing that's missing in this largely industry-driven conversation is like, what's the purpose of technology, right? Like, I think we lost the thread a little bit, that we're just like, we built it because we can. Maybe that's not always good, right? Like, if it produces this product and the social impact that we're like, well, things were better before, like, maybe we shouldn't just do things because they're cool. Maybe we should like take a step back and be like, well, why, right? Like, what's the broader social aim we're trying to achieve here? Like, we want government, we want technology that advances, like makes the quality of people's lives better, right? That advances human well-being. And as somebody who comes much more from like that kind of social perspective, I would love to see people like who roll up their hands and do the technology piece, like thinking about it more through that lens. So I feel like given that you all signed up for this and like the awesome ideas you brought today, I think you will. But to bring that framing of like not how do we keep people engaged, how do we keep them scrolling, but like, why are we doing this?
Anyone want to take on the question about what students should know as they're pursuing this?
What remains like cool research that just like keeps changing? So like what other people in your group, what kind of problems they're working on, don't get swayed by that too much. I mean, when I was working on India-Pakistan conflict, there was no other paper that looked into web manifestation of conflict between nuclear adversaries. Or like when we started working on gender equality in Iran, I mean, that's also like a problem not tackled by many. And we wrote a paper and we also quoted Salman Rushdie in that paper. So just like be brave in like following your heart and think about like what, like even if the problem is not hot right now, it might become just because of you. So keep working on them.
Sounds beautiful. I totally agree. I often feel like a little bit of a phony answering this question because I'm very much still like living it and learning it, and I think we all are. I think human beings are as you go through your careers, your life. But I think, you know, in this, in technology, in really anything else that you do, you just want to be the person that can get a job done and know that you're not too good for it. Everybody just wants to be somebody, everyone just wants to work with somebody who's a team player that's going to roll up their sleeves and be like, oh my God, I can help you with this. I have no idea what that is, but I'm happy to learn graphic design, whatever. There is nothing more valuable than that in a person. I think that's so, I think that is applicable in a lot of different fields, and especially in this one. There is, you know, annoying parts of this work, whether it's in tech or in policy, and there's also really cool payoff ones. Just know that if you put your time in on the, you know, maybe parts that you don't like as much or that you don't get seen as much, it is really going to pay off.
Great. Thank you all so much. I just want to open it up to any questions. We have these really impressive professionals here on the stage. If you have any questions for them, I'm opening it up to the audience. Yes? Yeah, I'm not sure if everyone heard that question, but it's about, for Annie, and what does online hate look like in a state like Pennsylvania that's a huge swing state with rural areas. I always hear the term Pittsburgh on the west and Philadelphia on the right, and then middle America in between. So that's a great question.
Yeah, it is a great question, and it's like horrifying. And it is not horrifying. It is really, really scary. It is really scary to be in an election year and sit with my team, who I like trust more than anybody in the world, love working with these people, and think they're the best at what they do. Being like, damn, this is hard. Like that is just, it is a challenge that I don't know. I actually know. I do know that no one person can solve. I think something that has been really important for us as we plan for it. And you know, on the government side and like the more official side of things, the online hate that we can really play a role in, and especially in this election, is misinformation and disinformation. Often they're one and the same, that like 100%. But by like really focusing on the definitions, we're able to take an apolitical view of it and actually take action that we can then justify. I think something that we are finding as we plan to do exactly that and plan how we're gonna do this are like really, ooh, oh no. Yeah, I'm out. Yeah, it's a really convenient time. But it's like, you know, is two things. Is, you know, one, just like we are gonna get, you know, I don't know if there's any press here. I don't think there is. We're gonna get shit from the press of some political persuasion or another for actions that we take here. That's just the way that the world is, and that's fine. You know, that's any sort of decision that we make is going to have a risk analysis, and that is part of the risk, and we will accept that or we will not accept that, and that's okay. So like kind of really standing strong in that and being faithful in that. And then the two is that there's like no playbook for this, which really sucks. There's a playbook on the political campaign side, I think, even then, you know, and that was something that in my prior life on political campaigns we worked really hard on. I learned stuff from. I think the Biden team in 2020 and in a bunch of teams in 2022 did a really great job on this, but there's not like a perfect model here. We're still making one. So it sort of goes back to kind of what we were talking about how no one's really an expert, right? So now it's an opportunity. It feels that way now. It's like no one's really an expert in doing this, so it's an opportunity, but like the risk is quite high. So, that is kind of how I think about it. I'm really, I saying all that as a human, as like a government person and someone that is working on this, like I actually am really confident in where we are. And in that the state will be able to work with our partners, both on like law enforcement and then also in counties and cities to make sure that people have the information that they need to vote and make accurate decisions. But it is like I think it's like the toughest problem out there. I really do.
Great. Do we have time for one more question? Are we out of time? Yes? Okay. Yes. Yeah, the question is about AI literacy education across all sectors, right? Given the lack of the lack of understanding of it, is AI education important across all sectors?
Yeah, I mean, I can say like to your point about training and like should people be educated on this, I think the broad answer is like absolutely yes. This is a fact of life. Like take it as a fact. Let's move on from there and like find out how to be successful in it. Governor Shapiro signed an EO at CMU last year, and part of that EO said that every federal or every state employee would have training in generative AI as part of their onboarding. And then we have like more and more training sessions that people can go for that's like more advanced. So I think that's really important. But one thing that we've talked a lot about, I think a lot of governments have talked about, is like how do we educate our kids? The governor in his budget address recently said that he wanted the legislature to think about digital literacy and information literacy. I totally agree. As a private person, I like absolutely think kids should be educated on how to use the internet, on what it's for, what it's not for, and I think AI should be part of that discussion. But I think it goes back to the sort of impediment of politics sometimes, where it's like that's really locally controlled. What can we bring to the table to make that a nonpartisan issue? And I think there is something. Like I'm definitely not like a pessimist about it, but it's hard.
I think maybe I would add to that I'm just now old enough, not too old, but just now old enough to kind of remember the hype around cyber when we first started all of that. And it took a lot. It took a lot of attenuating the hype. It took a lot of, eventually we set up a whole agency in CISA to help deal with this and to promote policies and to push out information. And arguably we're still working on that. I think AI is going to have to go through some of those things. I think there are templates and lessons that we could possibly take from. And obviously those things are intertwined as well. But it'll be a process, and it'll be a process where there'll be a lot of different levels of engagement. And part of it will be both bringing down the hype and I think also helping people understand that you don't have to understand the ins and outs of exactly how ChatGPT works to take away lessons about how to use it or what's good for, how that could be employed throughout society.
I do think, just on that, I do think the hype is like very real. Like something that my boss said a lot when I first started talking to her about like wanting to take this on, our chief of staff, was like, cool, but just like so you remember, last year everybody was freaked out about flying cars, and I'm just saying. And she's totally right, and I do think it's a very different thing, and I do think it's a very different industry and a place than flying cars, but it's like fair enough, right? That like it sometimes takes big catalysts to change our point of views and our ways of working on things. We've just seen one in the pandemic, so again, like we should probably plan for that. But I think the hype is like totally fair. This is not like the best thing society will ever do.
Yeah, the other thing, because I feel like education is mentioned a lot, and part of that is it feels like when you don't have anything else to say, you're like, we should teach people more things. You're welcome. And my reaction is often like, okay, well, what is that AI education going to look like, right? And there probably are some people out there who have like substantial specific ideas as to what that will be, but oftentimes I feel like it's a little bit of a throwaway, and the United States, to does not have a great track record. Part of it is like we don't have a federal education system. It's largely federalized, right? Like each school district can kind of do their own thing, like see how we teach evolution, see how we teach sex ed. So like that's gonna be a challenge in schools, one would presume. But until we really get down into the specifics of what are our objectives, what are we trying to do? Are we teaching them prompt engineering? Okay, let's teach them prompt engineering. Are we teaching them about AI ethics and bias to like encourage people to bring a skeptical attitude? And then like most of you guys, I presume, have not yet worked full-time in a full-time job. But having sat through like many a corporate or mostly government, I guess, training, like I have never had like a useful like job training, on-the-job training. It's just like click through the brainless PowerPoints that Congress says you have to engage in, you learn nothing. So I think the call to like really educate people with useful AI, like contextualize AI, think about how they can usefully apply it would be great, but we're gonna have to like really do better than we have in the past in terms of workforce training. Maybe I'm the exception. You know, I worked for Deloitte. Deloitte actually did a very good job with training their employees. They're the exception, so like, I don't know, get Deloitte to do it. But like truly, as a former federal government employee, I cannot tell you like how many hours I spent like clicking through a like congressionally required CYA kind of training that didn't actually give me any value. So yes on education, but I think we need to like take that next step as to like, what the heck are we educating people to do?
All right, I think that's our last question. Thank you all so much. Thank you to our judges. This was phenomenal. Okay. Okay.
Here we go. You gotta switch an input somewhere?
Yep. Just make sure this is full screen before we do anything.
Nope. Oh boy.
I got
what
it.
I didn't want to.
I got it.
Oh no, it should be going now.
Here we go.
Okay.
Just make sure it's right. We're not displaying this at the moment. Yep, no, we're not displaying that. You're good.
Making me nervous up here, man.
You're good.
All right. Seamless.
Should be there.
Should be doing the same thing.
Should be the exact same.
All right, great. Well, everybody, comes down to this. Before we get going, once I'm done with all these, I would really love it if everybody here could come up here to take a picture. Everybody involved. So we're on that, good. Everybody, and then we'll do a separate picture with the various winning teams and things like that. Also, if you do happen to win, there's a form back there you must fill out before you walk out of here. So we can actually do all the stuff after that. Okay, that's that. Here we go. So starting with the policy track, we had 2 prizes for the 5 entries on the policy track, all of which were fantastic. This was not an easy decision. Starting with the runner-up prize in the policy track goes to Rachel Harris. Congratulations, Rachel. Rachel, are you here? Can you come on up? Come on up over there. You get to stand over there. That's where you're going to stand. All right. You stand right there. Okay. Right over there. Okay. The grand prize winner of the policy track is Miles Kramer. Miles, come on up. All right. Congratulations, Miles. All right, on the tech track, the judges couldn't make up their minds, so we actually end up having 3 prizes on the tech track. We start with the honorable mention on the tech track goes to Goober's Hate Blocker. Honorable mention. Come on up, guys. All right, like I said, there was 10 on the tech track. They were all really, really fantastic. So this was a very hard decision. The runner-up prize on the tech track goes to Harmony Hacktivists. Come on up. This is the 2nd year in a row that Tessa has actually pulled off a victory here. So congratulations there. All right, means a good reminder for coming back next year. All right, and the grand prize winner for the tech track goes to HateBot. Come on up, guys, on the HateBot. All right. One more round of applause for all the winners and for everyone here today. All right. Really fantastic here. Okay, so I want now, Susan, how are we going to do this? Oh, wait, hold on. I have one more slide to thank everybody. Do I have any of the advisors come here today? What advisors? Look, we got an advisor. 2 advisors. Oh, round of applause for the advisors. Thank you so much for coming, actually physically, and thank the ones that might be watching our live stream as well. And of course, all my co-organizers as well that are here, the ones that can't be here. So for Susan and for Sienna and for Jamie and for Nora, who made it out here today. So very grateful for all of you and all the work that we're doing to combat online hate. Okay, it's late and the snow is coming. So what we're gonna do is do we get some pictures of the winners? We're gonna all come up to the front though. We're gonna all come up to the front. Oh, after she does this, that's what we're gonna do here. We're gonna do winners here for